With a swift rip, she tore open his shirt. He was the noble Ming Zun, exposed and vulnerable before her. Not only was he at the mercy of a female rogue, but she also wore a look of genuine concern. Bei Qing gaped, speechless. He had never witnessed anything so brazen. Yi Qianming seethed inwardly. This woman has been playing me from the very start. Every encounter was a new and inventive humiliation. Luo Qingtong flushed, aware of her impropriety. Lightly touching his wounds, she murmured, "Is this all right?" "This should be enough." Bei Qing yelped as an assassin's blade grazed his arm. Luo Qingtong's head snapped towards the source of the attack. Xiaozu materialized instantly, shielding them. "Stop them!" Xiaozu shrieked, "Master, hurry! They are strong." Activating her soul technique, Luo Qingtong moved like a phantom, a blow of motion too swift for the human eye to follow. The assassins were thrown back, their pained cries filling the night. Yi Qianming watched, awestruck. "She's truly extraordinary." Xiaozu, trembling, huddled behind Luo Qingtong. She snapped, "If you can't even hold them back, it'll refine you. You're meant to be protecting us, not cowering. What good are you?" Xiaozu, stung by her harsh words, transformed. His small form shrunk further, solidifying as spiritual energy crackled around him. Luo Qingtong instructed, "Make it fast. Minimize the damage." Yi Qianming's poison was neutralized. Xiaozu, a miniature version of his true, magnificent form, unleashed a torrent of purpled spiritual energy, taking the form of an awe-inspiring dragon. The battle shifted drastically in their favor with Xiaozu's intervention. Feng Yu watched, his mind consumed by a single, urgent command. "Stop them. Kill the target." But the assassins faltered. Sensing their window of opportunity closing, Yi Qianming urged Luo Qingtong, "Run." Luo Qingtong glanced back at him, raising an eyebrow. "Can't handle it." Her nonchalant air only strengthened his resolve. He would sooner perish than allow Luo Qingtong to be harmed. How could he abandon her? He had attempted to capture her countless times. And yet, she always spared him. Ending her life would require minimal effort on his part. Luo Qingtong said, "Do you honestly hold no resentment towards me, after all I've done? I've repeatedly put your life on the line." Yi Qianming's response was resolute. "No. It was my own misjudgment. I bear no ill will." Guilt gnawed at her. The assassins pressed their attack. With a sigh, Luo Qingtong made up her mind. "Close your eyes," she instructed, her voice calm and unwavering. Confused, yet trusting, Yi Qianming closed his eyes. Luo Qingtong removed her mask. Taking his face in her hands, she kissed him. Yi Qianming's mind was a flurry of confusing sensations. Instinctively, she channeled the remainder of her dwindling strength into him. The assassins reeled back, momentarily stunned by the unexpected power surge. "Don't kill her. She's still useful." Xiaozu grabbed Yi Qianming. "Run." Luo Qingtong watched them flee, a maelstrom of emotions raging within her. So, he's not entirely heartless. He does care. She plucked a nearby leaf, and flicked it casually towards the approaching assassins. The instant it reached Yi Qianming, the unassuming leaf transformed into a dazzling, golden shield, absorbing the full force of the attack. Yi Qianming, for the umpteenth time stunned by her actions, could only stare. This woman, ripping a piece of fabric from his shirt, he threw it to her. "Here. Shout for help." Luo Qingtong's eyes lit up. "Great idea." Catching the cloth, she yelled towards the window, "Help! Assassins! Save me!" Then, with a resounding boom, she slammed her palm against the ground, activating the hidden formation. The assassins were trapped, their combined assault against the shimmering barrier proving futile. A formation master. They stared at her, incredulous. Luo Qingtong grabbed Yi Qianming's hand. "Let's go." The entire room shook violently as the assassins' combined might battered the formation, the very foundations of the building threatening to give way. Royal guards stormed the room, their spiritual energy clashing against the assassins in a deafening cacophony of light and sound. The captain of the guards paused, his eyes scanning the chaotic scene. "Hold on. I'll handle this." You pursue the target. Concealed within the depths of the forest, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianming observed the unfolding events. "Just who have you managed to provoke? Why are they so hell-bent on your demise?" Yi Qianming calmly identified them as assassins from the Zhizun organization, his tone betraying no trace of fear. Luo Qingtong, seething with anger, hissed, "This is all thanks to you." Feng Yu quickly interrupted. Allow him to finish. Yi Qianming's gaze remained steadfastly upon Luo Qingtong. She consciously avoided his eyes, the guilt of putting him in harm's way weighing heavily on her conscience. Sensing her apprehension, he reassured her gently, "Don't worry. My men have the situation well in hand. However, your poison." He paused, his eyes flickering to the distance that stretched between them. "It's rather difficult to treat from this distance. And the royal guards cannot hold them off indefinitely." Frustration creased his forehead. "Why is she so determined to avoid me?" Luo Qingtong realized her caution was bordering on paranoia. Gesturing to Bei Qing and Feng Yu, she explained, "I instructed them to take care of it." Exasperation colored Yi Qianming's tone. "They are in your employ. It's your responsibility." Bei Qing and Feng Yu exchanged bewildered looks. Their master's behavior was becoming increasingly peculiar. Yi Qianming's gaze never strayed from Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong was consumed by guilt. Suddenly, yet another volley of light hurtled towards them, forcing them to dive for cover. Luo Qingtong frowned. "They are here already." Without a moment's hesitation, she turned to Yi Qianming. "Ill-treat your poison. You deal with them." Yi Qianming was taken aback by her selfless action. She's truly warmth spread through his chest. She truly hadn't abandoned him. Suddenly, Luo Qingtong grabbed his arm. As he reached for his medicine pouch, their eyes met. Yi Qianming froze. With one swift, decisive rip, Luo Qingtong tore open his shirt. He was the noble Ming Zun, now utterly vulnerable before a woman. Not only was he being handled by a female rogue, but she wore an expression of deep, genuine concern. Bei Qing stared, speechless. He had never witnessed such a brazen act. Inwardly, Yi Qianming fumed. "This woman's been toying with me since the very beginning." Every encounter was a new, inventive humiliation. Luo Qingtong blushed, painfully aware she'd overstepped. Lightly touching his wounds, she mumbled, "Is this all right?" "This should suffice." Bei Qing cried out, as an assassin's blade grazed his skin. Luo Qingtong's head snapped toward the source of the attack. Xiaozu appeared in a flash, positioning himself between them and the assassins. "Stop them," Xiaozu squealed. "Master, hurry. These are strong ones." Activating her soul technique, Luo Qingtong moved like a phantom, her speed beyond human comprehension. The assassins were sent flying, their agonized cries filling the night. Yi Qianming watched, awestruck. "She's truly extraordinary." Xiaozu, huddled behind Luo Qingtong, trembled with terror. She snarled at him, "If you can't even hold them back, I'll refine you. You're supposed to protect us, not cower. What good are you?" Stung, Xiaozu transformed. His already diminutive form shrank further, becoming denser, as spiritual energy crackled around him. Luo Qingtong said, "A quick battle. Minimize the damage." Yi Qianming's poison had been completely neutralized. Xiaozu, a miniature version of his true, awe-inspiring form, unleashed a torrent of purpled spiritual energy, taking on the shape of a magnificent, swirling dragon. The battle shifted drastically with Xiaozu's entry. Feng Yu watched, consumed by a single, urgent command. "Stop them. Kill the target." But the assassins hesitated. Sensing the danger, Yi Qianming urged Luo Qingtong, "Run." Luo Qingtong looked back at him, cocking her head. "Can't handle them." Her seemingly nonchalant attitude solidified Yi Qianming's resolve. He would rather die than see her harmed. Could he really abandon her? He had tried to capture her so many times, yet she had always spared his life. Killing her would be effortless. Luo Qingtong spoke, her voice soft. "Do you truly bear no resentment towards me, after all I've done? I've repeatedly put your life in danger." Yi Qianming's voice was steady, full of conviction. "No. It was my own misjudgment. I don't blame you." Guilt twisted in Luo Qingtong's gut. The assassins were closing in. Resolute, Luo Qingtong made up her mind. "Close your eyes," she instructed, her voice calm amidst the chaos. Confused, but trusting, Yi Qianming obeyed. Luo Qingtong removed her mask. Taking his face in her hands, she kissed him. Yi Qianming's mind was a whirlwind of sensations. Instinctively, she channeled the last vestiges of her power into him. The assassins reeled, momentarily stunned by the power surge. "Don't kill her. She's still of use," Xiaozu yelled, grabbing Yi Qianming. "Run." As they fled, Luo Qingtong watched, her heart a storm of conflicting emotions. So, he's not completely heartless. He genuinely cares. She plucked a leaf from a nearby tree, and with a casual flick of her wrist, sent it flying towards the oncoming assassins. Upon reaching Yi Qianming, the unassuming leaf transformed into a brilliant golden shield, absorbing the full force of the attack. Yi Qianming, stunned yet again by her actions, stared at her. This woman, tearing a strip of fabric from his shirt, he threw it to her. Here. Yell for help. Luo Qingtong's eyes lit up. Great idea. Catching the fabric, she yelled towards the window, help. Assassins. Save me. Then, with a powerful crash, her palm struck the ground, activating a hidden formation. The assassins were trapped, their combined might unable to break through the shimmering barrier. A formation master. They stared at her, incredulous. Luo Qingtong grabbed Yi Qianming's hand. Let's go. The entire room trembled violently, as the assassins unleashed their combined power against the formation, pushing it to its limits. Royal guards poured into the chamber, their spiritual energy clashing against the assassins in a deafening maelstrom of light and sound. The captain of the guards paused, surveying the chaotic battle. Hold on. I'll handle this. Pursue the target. From their hidden vantage point within the forest, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianming watched the events unfold. Who in the world have you offended? Why are they so intent on killing you? Yi Qianming calmly revealed they were assassins from the Jizun organization, his tone betraying no fear. Luo Qingtong seethed. This is all thanks to you. Feng Yu quickly interrupted. Let him finish. Yi Qianming's gaze remained intensely focused on Luo Qingtong. She deliberately avoided his eyes, the weight of his near-death experience pressing down on her. He noticed her discomfort and reassured her gently, don't worry. My people have the situation under control. As for your poison, he trailed off, his eyes flickering to the distance separating them. It's challenging to treat from so far away. And the royal guards can't hold them off indefinitely. Frustration creased his brow. Why is she so insistent on keeping me at arm's length? Luo Qingtong realized her excessive caution was getting the better of her. Gesturing toward Bei Qing and Feng Yu, she explained, I told them to handle it. Yi Qianming's tone was sharp with exasperation. They are employed by you. This is your responsibility. Bei Qing and Feng Yu exchanged bewildered glances. Their master's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. Yi Qianming continued to stare at Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over her. Suddenly, another barrage of light hurtled toward them. Luo Qingtong's reflexes took over, and she pushed Yi Qianming out of the path of the incoming attack. Look out! A sharp cry tore from Yi Qianming's lips as the attack struck him. With a sickening rip, Luo Qingtong tore open the man's shirt. He was the regal Ming Zun, now reduced to a state of undress by a woman. Not only had she stripped him bare, but she also wore an expression of utter panic. Bei Qing's eyes widened. He'd never seen anything so stimulating. Yi Qianming was livid. This woman. She's been deliberately toying with me since the beginning. Every encounter was a carefully orchestrated humiliation. Luo Qingtong, her cheeks burning with shame, could only stammer, it was an accident. Really? Her fingers grazed his wounds, sending a jolt of unfamiliar energy through Yi Qianming's body, causing him to shudder. He didn't understand what she was doing. Luo Qingtong, meanwhile, was inwardly cursing him up and down. Is this man made of iron? The energy won't flow. As her fingers moved lower, Yi Qianming roared, what do you think you're doing? Flustered, Luo Qingtong stammered, I'm just trying to heal you, master. What's wrong with that? I'm just checking. Suddenly, Bei Qing cried out, as he was struck by one of the assassin's hidden blades. Luo Qingtong cursed under her breath. Not now. She knew she couldn't make it in time. Xiao Zhu yelled as he threw himself in front of Bei Qing. Get her! Xiao Zhu's voice echoed in her head. This crazy woman. These assassins are at least at the Spirit King realm. We're doomed. Using her soul technique, Luo Qingtong transformed, moving with inhuman speed. The assassins cried out as she tore through their ranks, her attacks ruthless and efficient. Yi Qianming watched, his expression unreadable. She's truly something else. Xiao Zhu, scared witless, cowered behind Luo Qingtong. Master, hurry. They are too strong. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed dangerously, as she turned her attention to the cowering pig. If you can't even hold them back, I'll refine you. I'm not keeping you as a pet for show. Do something useful. Xiao Zhu, his pride deeply wounded, transformed. His skin hardened, taking on a stone-like quality, as his spiritual energy surged. Luo Qingtong yelled, "A quick battle. Minimize their suffering." She was already working on Yi Qianming's poison when, to her shock, Xiao Zhu was knocked aside. The diminutive pig squealed indignantly. "Hey! I thought you were on my side." A tall, imposing figure stepped out of the shadows, his eyes locked on Luo Qingtong. He pinned her with a chilling gaze. "So, Zi Gui Tong. We finally meet." He reached out a hand, his movements deceptively slow. Luo Qingtong instinctively dodged, her eyes narrowing as she assessed her opponent. A strange sense of familiarity washed over Yi Qianming as he watched the exchange. Luo Qingtong's attacker moved again, and this time, Yi Qianming knew. With a strangled gasp, he lurched forward. Luo Qingtong. With a rip, Luo Qingtong tore open the man's shirt. The man was stunned. Luo Qingtong hurriedly began to work, her fingers moving over his wounds, channeling her healing energy into him. Yi Qianming's body was riddled with various poisons, intricately intertwined yet maintaining a delicate balance. Xiao Qianming, recognizing the signs, declared. He possesses the rare Wan du physique. Luo Qingtong had read about this in ancient texts. A fully matured Wan du physique could manipulate and extract poisons from their own body, making them formidable opponents when combined with powerful weapons and techniques. This piqued her interest. She wondered what kind of surprises this so-called trash class held. As soon as they entered the classroom, Su Xiaoxiao greeted Luo Qingtong and invited her to sit with her. She glanced at Xiao Qianming, confused, since she hadn't seen him with Luo Qingtong the day before. Luo Qingtong explained, "This is my precious little darling, a plaything. Useful and cute." Su Xiaoxiao blushed, flustered by this explanation. Xiao Qianming inwardly smirked. This woman is deliberately trying to make things awkward. Yuan Hugang stormed into the classroom, his eyes blazing with fury as he spotted Luo Qingtong. He still hadn't figured out how Luo Qingtong had broken through his defenses and crippled his hand. He wanted revenge. Luo Qingtong simply rolled her eyes at him, thinking him a fool for seeking more pain. She turned her attention to Su Xiaoxiao, waiting to see if she would act like she had the day before and try to steal Xiao Qianming. As long as she took Xiao Qianming away, she would do anything. As Yuan Hugang reached for Xiao Qianming, Luo Qingtong caught his hand. A jolt of energy, like a powerful electric shock, shot through Yuan Hugang's arm, making him cry out in pain. He recoiled, his face contorted in agony. The venomous expression in his eyes sent shivers down Ming Zun's spine. The man smiled, nestled comfortably in Luo Qingtong's arms. When the man followed Luo Qingtong's instructions and returned to his true form, Feng Yu and Bei Qing didn't hesitate to swear their allegiance to Luo Qingtong as their new master. Luo Qingtong, however, was amused. She had initially expected resistance, but their complete submission was almost disappointing. Bai Lian, meanwhile, continued her machinations, spreading rumors about Luo Qingtong's supposed neglect of the Luo family, claiming their father's disappearance was her fault. As long as Luo Lao remained ill, she would be safe. Once he recovered and came looking for her, she would be doomed. Bai Lian put on a pitiful act, garnering sympathy from Chu Lao, who doted on her. She's too kind. That's why Qingtong takes advantage of her. Suddenly, a loud crash interrupted them. A servant stumbled into the room, a message clutched in his trembling hand. "Miss, it's terrible. Wang Shi's men are here." Bai Lian's mother was enraged. Bai Lian paled, instantly regretting her actions. She had already sent a message to the Wang family, and now, the furious husband raged. "She's gone too far this time. I'll show her what happens when she messes with us." Bai Lian looked desperate, begging Chu Lao to intervene. He rose, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "This is merely a power play. All they want is the recommendation and the family heirloom." He then turned his attention to Luo Qingtong, his voice dripping with venom. "You dare disrespect Chu Lao? You'll never enter the Qianyu Academy." Luo Qingtong simply shrugged, unconcerned. "That thing's been used. I don't want it." She could enter the Qianyu Academy on her own merit, not because of some useless recommendation. Staring pointedly at Chu Lao's jade pendant, she said, "Isn't this the fifth prince's engagement gift to me?" Chu Lao exploded in rage, ripping the pendant from his neck. "You?" Bai Lian was speechless, her face turning ashen. Luo Qingtong burst out laughing. "So this is your limit? I wonder who's truly reached their limit. She slapped Bai Lian across the face. Chu Lao had never been so humiliated. Luo Qingtong, not content with the slap, continued to mock them. This is what you get. I wonder who's truly desperate. Tossing the jade pendant aside, she turned and left. She relished in their helpless rage. I love it when they can't touch me. Xiao Zhu suddenly materialized, looking at her with admiration. Just then, the engagement ring pulsed with a familiar energy. Luo Qingtong was startled. Xiao Zhu trembled in fear. That ring has been quiet for so long, why is it acting up now? Luo Qingtong had been lecturing Bai Lian moments before. Be a good girl and eat your medicine. But in the blink of an eye, she froze, her body stiffening. Something was happening with the engagement ring. Meanwhile, back in the dark Nether capital, Yi Qianming paced restlessly, his thoughts consumed by Luo Qingtong. His return had caused quite a stir. Feng Yu and Bei Qing greeted him with a respectful bow. Yu Lao, however, couldn't resist teasing him. So, the little beauty finally lured you back, huh? I thought you were gone for good. Yi Qianming raised an eyebrow, the dragonstone ring on his finger glinting ominously. Yu Lao was startled. He'd thought Yi Qianming had been joking, but had actually returned to the dark Nether capital. Yi Qianming acted as if it was the most natural thing in the world. It was just a matter of retrieving something I left behind. It has nothing to do with her. Yu Lao, his eyes fixed on the ring, continued his teasing. Don't tell me you went back just to retrieve that ring. Seems like that little beauty has you wrapped around her finger. Xiaobei, emboldened by his master's good mood, piped up, Master Zi isn't like that. Yi Qianming was about to explain when he suddenly froze, his entire body radiating a bone-chilling aura. Who told you I went back because of her? His voice was dangerously low. Do I need a reason to return to my own home? He glared at them. Does my interest in someone require your approval? Xiao Zhu stammered, we were just. Yi Qianming's chilling gaze fell upon him. So you think I returned because of her? She's nothing but he stopped abruptly, as if realizing something. Yu Lao's eyes widened in realization. He stepped forward, concern etched on his face. Master, you're flushed. It's too hot in here. Are you all right? Yi Qianming's face turned an even deeper shade of red. He snapped, nonsense. Imperfectly fine. He glared at Xiaobei. What are you staring at? He spun around and stormed off. Luo Qingtong, meanwhile, was at the Qianyu Empire, enjoying tea at a tea house. Master, how do you plan to deal with the Qianyu royal family? Ever since the Linju incident, he had reaped quite a few benefits and now was eager for more chaos. Luo Qingtong smirked. If we're going to do this, we're going to make them suffer. But we need a plan. Suddenly, the tea house erupted in commotion. Look at that man. He's so handsome. Intrigued, Luo Qingtong and Xiao Zhu turned to look. Their jaws dropped. Ming Zun was standing there, in the middle of the tea house. Let's see if she can escape this time. He was playing with fire, and he was about to get burned. Seeing him appear, Luo Qingtong wanted to bolt. Xiao Zhu was equally terrified. He turned his head away, refusing to look. Xiao Zhu's internal monologue was a frantic mess. That damn Yi Qianming. Why do we keep running into him? No. I have to refuse him. I have to. Luo Qingtong smacked him. Shut up. He only knows you as Zi Guitong. He doesn't know about the Jiawu Mountain incident. And don't forget about your subordinate. This gave Luo Qingtong pause. Suddenly, a mischievous grin spread across her face. Why not mess with him a little? Xiao Zhu was drenched in cold sweat. No. Master. Are you crazy? This is Ming Zun. We're playing with fire. Luo Qingtong adjusted her appearance and approached the man. With a flirtatious smile, she purred, your captivating aura has mesmerized me. May I join you? Luo Qingtong's words caused Ming Zun's eyes to widen slightly. His clenched fists betrayed his inner turmoil. His legs, however, seemed to have a mind of their own, moving towards her. He had to resist. Suddenly, a hand grasped hers. The man looked at her, a warm smile gracing his lips. All right. Join me. Her hand was enveloped in his, and she couldn't pull away. A shiver of unease ran down her spine. This man. Was he truly Ming Zun? A wave of cold dread washed over her. Very well. I'll sit here then. The man hadn't released her hand. As she sat down, Luo Qingtong's unease intensified. You mentioned raising demonic beasts earlier. Yes? A captivating man like you naturally deserves to raise demonic beasts. She gestured towards a man with a cage full of colorful birds. So, it's because you like demonic beasts that you keep showing up. He realized she'd been teasing him all this time, and if it were anyone else, he would have killed them on the spot. However, he found himself admitting that if it were this woman, and as long as she didn't cause any trouble, he would allow her to stay by his side. Luo Qingtong was starting to feel uneasy. What is he thinking? I should leave. Yi Qianming's name suddenly echoed in her mind, startling her. She stared at him, her mind racing. Yi brother. Should I call him Xiao Tong? She was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't notice Yi Qianming's amused expression. He had assumed she was running away because she was afraid of him. Is that so? He said, a playful glint in his eyes. You were running away because you thought I wasn't strong enough. My name is Zi Qiu. You can call me Xiao Tong. Yi Qianming's eyes narrowed. Still using a fake name. I've already investigated your background. Don't play games with me. He was getting annoyed. Zi Tong. What a strange name. Luo Qingtong blinked, confused. All of Heiyu City is looking for you, Zi Gui Tong. Didn't you know? Luo Qingtong choked on her wine. Could he be looking for her? Hadn't she told his subordinates to dismiss any inquiries? Could there be another reason? She quickly changed the subject. Why have you come to the Qianyu Empire, Yi brother? Yi Qianming looked at her with a mischievous glint in his eyes. To catch someone, of course. He wanted to see how she would react. He casually mentioned that the woman he was after was a wanted criminal, a notorious evildoer. Hearing that he was there to apprehend someone, Luo Qingtong relaxed. If he were there to capture her, he would have already made a move. She must have been overthinking. Yi Qianming continued to drink with her, one cup after another, until Luo Qingtong was slightly tipsy. I want to see how long your eyes can last. Luo Qingtong readily accepted the challenge. After a while, Luo Qingtong's vision began to blur. The alcohol was finally taking effect. When Yi Qianming offered her another cup, Luo Qingtong waved him off. The purpose of her visit was to treat his injuries. Yi Qianming, hearing this, reached out. Luo Qingtong's mind raced. So, He's injured after all. He really is interested. Their fingers brushed, sending a shiver down Yi Qianming's spine. A strange, unfamiliar sensation washed over him. Yi Qianming's cheeks flushed. Why am I reacting this way? This is strange. He pulled his hand back. Luo Qingtong's examination revealed the same weakness as before. His meridians were still incredibly fragile. How can someone this strong have such weak meridians? She wondered. It's baffling. She also couldn't identify the cause. It was truly a bizarre and perplexing injury. He, who was normally averse to being touched, felt a strange sense of comfort at her touch. It was a novel and pleasant experience. Luo Qingtong couldn't understand why the more she examined him, the more confused she became. Yi Qianming asked, "What's the matter?" Luo Qingtong replied that it was nothing, inwardly frustrated by another fruitless examination. Her eyes were about to give out. She needed to find a solution soon. Just as she was about to excuse herself, the man stopped her, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Leaving so soon? Don't you want to fulfill our agreement? What agreement? You made that up. Luo Qingtong was indignant. I never agreed to anything. Yi Qianming chuckled. Didn't you say we wouldn't leave until we were both drunk? Don't tell me you're going back on your word. Luo Qingtong was trapped. What's going on? Why won't he let me leave? She could only blame her own big mouth. The man, seeing through her thoughts, said, Your eyes won't last much longer. I'll wait until you give up. Resigned, Luo Qingtong agreed to accompany him. She immediately regretted her decision. Why had she agreed to this? She glared at Bei Qing. Why didn't you stop me? Bei Qing, slapping his forehead, groaned. This is going to be a disaster. Yi Qianming smiled to himself. This time, I'll see how you escape. After some time, he grew restless. Feng Yu reassured him. Don't worry, master. I've already sent men to follow her. Everything's under control. Why haven't they reported back yet? Yi Qianming crushed the cup in his hand, his patience wearing thin. Luo Qingtong, meanwhile, was staggering back with Bei Qing. Yi Qianming's eyes narrowed dangerously. Dead drunk. Take him back. Yi Qianming's icy gaze sent shivers down their spines. Feeling Yi Qianming's murderous aura, Xiaobei trembled. Who told you he was dead drunk? He demanded. He's just pretending. Yi Qianming's anger flared. You dare question my judgment? Do you want to die? Xiaobei instantly wilted under his gaze. Feng Yu hurriedly intervened. Master, forgive Xiaobei's insolence. He's still young and doesn't understand. Yi Qianming reluctantly let it go. Go and find out what Ziyi's up to. Bring him to me. Xiaobei was excited by this order. Master, you're finally going to. Yi Qianming glared at him. Do you want to end up in the dungeon again? Xiaobei immediately shut his mouth. Well, leave this to Feng Yu. Go and investigate. Yi Qianming turned his chilling gaze on the still unconscious Luo Qingtong. That Ziyi is the only lead we have to finding that woman. We need to find out where he's hiding. Xiaobei was confused. Shouldn't we focus on capturing the woman, Master? Why Ziyi? Yi Qianming was about to explain when his gaze landed on Xiaobei again, and he hesitated. He looked at the empty cup in his hand. I'll go find some more wine. With that, he abruptly stood and left. Xiaobei looked towards Feng Yu, bewildered. Feng Yu simply shrugged, equally confused. Maybe Master likes Ziyi. He whispered. Xiaobei gasped, his eyes widening in disbelief. Man. And man. That's he struggled to find the words. Feng Yu shook his head. You're still too young to understand these things. This only confused Xiaobei further. He was 19 years old. What was there to not understand? As time went on, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. His master was clearly looking for a woman, and now he was obsessed with a man. Feng Yu stealthily approached him. Master, you've never shown interest in anyone before. Xiaobei jumped, startled. What are you doing sneaking up on me like that? You scared me to death. Feng Yu smiled sheepishly. This is what I do. Xiaobei was about to scold him for eavesdropping when he suddenly froze, his eyes widening in horror. Feng Yu paled, a single tear rolling down his cheek. This is our little secret, right? Xiaobei's face crumpled. My dearest brother, how could you betray me like this? Feng Yu reached out and caressed Xiaobei's. Xiaobei pushed his hand away. Brother, please. Have mercy. Don't. What are you doing? He stumbled back and fled. Feng Yu watched him go, a strange mix of emotions swirling within him. He had confirmed his suspicions. He had feelings for Xiaobei. And now, Xiaobei knew. He had lost his chance. Feng Yu looked towards the sky, his heart aching. He couldn't tell Xiaobei how he felt. He could only watch from afar, his lover silent, unrequited ache in his chest. Meanwhile, Luo Qingtong had arrived at Jiawu Mountain's Yin Kuei Palace. The people there greeted her arrival with respect. Luo Qingtong was pleased with this reception. Xiao Zhu, however, put on an air of superiority. These underlings know nothing of decorum. After receiving Luo Qingtong's approval, the elder requested her assistance in breaking the formation protecting the palace. It was common knowledge that Ziyi Guitong was renowned for her skill in formations. The palace, known as Qianzi Palace, was heavily guarded by a complex formation. Its true name was Ziyi Palace, and the guards were all members of the Qianzi sect. Luo Qingtong produced the Shu Mi ring, and casually tossed it into the air. The Qianyu royal treasury shimmered into view. The woman simply tossed something inside. The next moment, the treasury exploded, sending debris flying everywhere. She had planted explosives. She had used the opportunity to plant the explosives while retrieving the Shu Mi ring. She had entrusted the royal treasury to her subordinates and instructed them to utilize the resources to replicate the Shu Mi ring and give them to her. She had also given them a list of medicinal ingredients to search for within the treasury. As time ticked by, she meticulously added the ingredients according to the ancient text. Xiao Zhu watched with skepticism. Do you even know what you're doing? Luo Qingtong, of course, knew exactly what she was doing. She was following the instructions in the ancient text, preparing the medicine to restore her grandfather's cultivation. The most crucial step was the final infusion of heaven and earth energy, which would maximize the pill's potency. Carefully, she added the ingredients one by one. Suddenly, the roof of the room exploded outwards. Luo Qingtong and Xiao Zhu stared at the gaping hole in the ceiling. The Qianzi fruit, the result of her efforts, had caused yet another alchemic explosion. Xiao Zhu, used to such explosions by now, simply burst out laughing. Another one bites the dust. I haven't seen Luo Qingtong fail this spectacularly in ages. He hadn't noticed the cloud of smoke drifting down from the hole in the roof. Without warning, the smoke solidified, pinning him to the ground. A blood-curdling squeal pierced the air. Night fell, and the pill was finally complete. Luo Qingtong checked it carefully, satisfied with the result. With a sigh of relief, she exclaimed, "It's finally done." Xiao Zhu added his congratulations. "It's about time. Who knows how many cauldrons you've blown up, and how many ingredients you've wasted." Relieved that he no longer had to live in constant fear of explosions, Xiao Zhu grabbed the pill, ready to swallow it in one gulp. Suddenly, Luo Qingtong smacked the back of his head, sending him sprawling across the table. The medicine she needed to heal her eyes was finally ready as well. Xiao Zhu, frantically searching for it, prompted Luo Qingtong to investigate what he had missed. To her surprise, tucked inside the cauldron was a letter. It was a recommendation from the Daqin Shengyuan Academy. Remembering the old man she had encountered in Heiyu City, Xiao Zhu speculated that the old man had given her the recommendation because he recognized her talent. However, a voice interrupted his musings. In a flash, several figures materialized in the room. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed, recognizing them as guards from the Luo residence. Elsewhere, Xiaobei was diligently searching for Feng Yu. Ever since their last encounter, Feng Yu had withdrawn, and now, sensing a surge of spiritual energy from the 9 Nether Yellow Springs, Xiaobei, unable to swim, panicked. Suddenly, a voice called out his name, making him think it was Feng Yu. He turned to see Zhu Fei, a warm smile on his face. Remembering his humiliating experience at the brothel, Xiaobei flushed crimson. Zhu Fei, noticing his reaction, couldn't resist teasing him. "So, the rumors are true. You prefer men." He leaned in close to Xiaobei. Xiaobei recoiled, pushing Zhu Fei away. "Stay away from me." He backed away, stumbling. Zhu Fei reached out and caught him. "Don't be shy, beautiful." Feng Yu, hidden from view, watched the interaction unfold, a strange warmth blooming in his chest. Seeing the two embracing, a pang of jealousy shot through Feng Yu's heart. Xiaobei was startled by Zhu Fei's sudden embrace, his eyes wide with confusion. He could only imagine the trauma the brothel had inflicted upon Zhu Fei. Forcing down his rising anger, Xiaobei turned to Feng Yu and pleaded, "Take me away from here." Zhu Fei, feigning embarrassment, explained that he was only trying to help, and Feng Yu accused him of taking advantage of Xiaobei. "Why would you do that to Xiaobei? If anything happens to him, I'll hold you responsible." He stepped forward threateningly. Zhu Fei, however, was unmoved. He casually revealed his superior cultivation level. Xiaobei remained silent, observing the escalating tension. Zhu Fei pushed Feng Yu away. "Don't you see I like you? Why do you keep rejecting me?" Feng Yu looked towards the sky, his face etched with despair. "I've already lost. My heart belongs to another." With that, he transformed into a stream of light and vanished, leaving Xiaobei standing there, utterly bewildered. Zhu Fei, seeing the genuine distress in Xiaobei's eyes, felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't intended to make things so serious. He rushed to apologize. Feng Yu, however, was unrelenting in his accusations. He was convinced that Zhu Fei was toying with Xiaobei's affections. He grabbed Zhu Fei's shirt, ready to expose his disguise. Xiaobei grabbed his hand and stopped him. "What are you doing? You're assaulting a woman." He glared at Feng Yu. Zhu Fei quickly adjusted his clothing, glaring daggers at Feng Yu. "Shameless! How dare you!" He spat, his eyes filled with righteous indignation. This only infuriated Feng Yu further, and he lunged at Zhu Fei, intent on ripping off his disguise. A sharp slap echoed through the air, as Xiaobei struck Feng Yu across the face. "How could you treat a woman like this?" he exclaimed, his eyes blazing with anger. The slap snapped Feng Yu out of his rage. Zhu Fei, meanwhile, was milking the situation for all it was worth, sobbing dramatically. "I can't live like this anymore. How can I ever face anyone again?" Xiaobei was now thoroughly confused. He couldn't abandon Zhu Fei, but he also couldn't ignore Feng Yu. He sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine. I give up." Feng Yu, watching the two of them, finally admitted defeat. His love for Xiaobei was unrequited. He turned and left, his heart heavy with sorrow. Zhou Fei smirked, a triumphant glint in his eyes. He'd finally gotten what he wanted. But why did he feel a twinge of guilt? Xiaobei, his face a mask of seriousness, apologized to Zhou Fei for Feng Yu's behavior. Feng Yu, listening from afar, tore his shirt in frustration. It was him. I saw him groping you. Zhou Fei glared at him. You're the shameless one. I was just trying to help myself. It's obvious you're the one who assaulted me. This accusation enraged Feng Yu, and he lunged forward again, tearing at Zhou Fei's clothes. Xiaobei, seeing this, instinctively pulled Zhou Fei closer, shielding him with his own body. Stop it, Feng Yu. What are you doing? Zhou Fei, seeing Xiaobei's protective stance, leaned into him, his heart pounding. Don't worry, beautiful. I won't let him hurt you. Yi Qianming, watching from afar, shook his head and sighed. Zhou Fei, you're useless. I knew I should have done it myself. Xiaozu, hiding in the shadows, snickered. What a love triangle. Who doesn't love a good drama? Zhou Fei, emboldened by Xiaobei's protective embrace, glared at Feng Yu, tears streaming down his face. You're disgusting. I'll never forgive you for this. Xiaobei, now thoroughly flustered, didn't know what to do. He couldn't abandon Zhou Fei, but he couldn't just ignore Feng Yu either. Zhou Fei, are you all right? Did he hurt you? Zhou Fei, seeing the genuine concern in Xiaobei's eyes, admitted that Feng Yu had indeed hurt him. He tore my clothes. Look, Xiaobei's face hardened. He turned to Feng Yu, his voice dangerously low. You've gone too far this time. Zhou Fei, sensing Xiaobei's anger, added fuel to the fire. He said he wanted me. He forced himself on me. This was the last straw for Xiaobei. He exploded, his spiritual energy surging as he lunged at Feng Yu, fists flying. Feng Yu, caught off guard, was sent sprawling. Xiaobei pinned him to the ground, his eyes blazing with fury. How could you? I thought you were my friend. Feng Yu, his face bruised and bloody, could only stare up at him, speechless. Xiaobei finally realized he had gone too far. He released Feng Yu and scrambled back, his face pale with shock. I didn't mean to. Zhou Fei, observing the scene, smirked. This was exactly what he wanted. It's all right, beautiful. I understand. It was just a misunderstanding. He extended a hand to help Xiaobei up. Xiaobei, his mind a whirl of confusion and guilt, avoided Zhou Fei's gaze. He knew he had been manipulated. As Zhou Fei leaned closer, Xiaobei suddenly felt a cold dread wash over him. He scrambled back, knocking into Feng Yu. Stay away from me. He yelled, his voice thick with panic. Feng Yu, his heart aching at Xiaobei's rejection, could only watch as he fled, his form disappearing into the night. Zhou Fei's triumphant smirk widened. He had finally succeeded. But why, he mused, do I feel this pang of guilt? He had confessed his love, and Xiaobei had reciprocated. Who wouldn't be overjoyed? However, Xiaobei's reaction had been anything but joyful. He'd apologized profusely for Feng Yu's actions, but Zhou Fei's attempts to comfort him were met with cold indifference. He realized Xiaobei blamed him for Feng Yu's outburst, and this made Zhou Fei's guilt intensify. He had manipulated Xiaobei, and now he was paying the price. Luo Qingtong arrived at Jiawu Mountain's Yinkuei Palace. The people there greeted her with respectful bows. Luo Qingtong was pleased by this deferential treatment. Xiaozu, however, was disdainful. These underlings are utterly clueless. After receiving Luo Qingtong's approval, the elder requested her help in breaking the formation protecting the palace. Everyone knew Ziyi Guitong was a master of formations. This palace, known as the Qianzi Palace, was heavily guarded by a powerful formation. Its real name, however, was Ziyi Palace, and the guards were all members of the Qianzi sect. Luo Qingtong produced the Shu Mi ring, and casually tossed it into the air. The Qianyu royal treasury shimmered into existence. She nonchalantly tossed something inside. The next moment, a powerful explosion rocked the treasury, sending debris raining down. She had planted explosives. She'd taken the opportunity to plant them while retrieving the Shu Mi ring. She'd entrusted the treasury to her subordinates, instructing them to use the resources to replicate the Shu Mi ring, and bring them to her. She had also given them a list of rare herbs to collect. As time passed, she meticulously arranged the ingredients according to the ancient text. Xiaozu, watching with a skeptical eye, couldn't help but ask, "Do you even know what you're doing?" Of course, Luo Qingtong knew exactly what she was doing. She was meticulously following the ancient text, preparing the medicine that would restore her grandfather's cultivation. The most critical step was the final infusion of heaven and earth energy, which would unlock the pill's full potential. She carefully added each ingredient, one by one. Suddenly, the roof exploded outwards. Luo Qingtong and Xiaozu stared at the gaping hole above them. The Qianzi fruit, the culmination of her efforts, had caused another alchemic explosion. Xiaozu, unfazed by the now familiar sight, simply burst out laughing. Another failure. I haven't seen Luo Qingtong mess up this badly in ages. He didn't notice the ominous cloud of smoke drifting down from the hole in the ceiling. Without warning, the smoke solidified, pinning him to the floor. A blood-curdling squeal pierced the air. As night fell, the pill was finally complete. Luo Qingtong examined it closely, a satisfied smile gracing her lips. Finally, she sighed, a wave of relief washing over her. Xiaozu offered his congratulations. It's about time. Who knows how many cauldrons you've blown up, and how many precious ingredients you've wasted. He was immensely relieved that he no longer had to live in constant fear of being blown sky-high. Xiaozu reached for the pill, eager to swallow it whole. Luo Qingtong smacked him upside the head, sending him sprawling across the table. The medicine she needed to heal her eyes was also finally finished. As Xiaozu frantically searched for it, he urged Luo Qingtong to figure out what he had overlooked. To her surprise, tucked away inside the cauldron was a letter. It was a recommendation for the Daqin Shengyuan Academy. Remembering the old man Shed encountered in Heiyu City, Xiaozu assumed he had given her the recommendation after recognizing her talent. However, a voice interrupted his musings. Several figures materialized in the room. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed, recognizing them instantly as guards from the Luo residence. Elsewhere, Xiaobei was desperately searching for Feng Yu. Ever since their last encounter, Feng Yu had become withdrawn. Now, sensing a powerful surge of spiritual energy emanating from the Nether Yellow Springs, Xiaobei, hampered by his inability to swim, panicked. A voice called out his name, and he instinctively turned, thinking it was Feng Yu. He saw Zhuofei, a warm, inviting smile playing on his lips. Remembering the humiliating events that had transpired at the brothel, Xiaobei flushed crimson. Zhuofei, noticing his reaction, couldn't resist teasing him. So, the rumors are true. You swing that way, huh? He leaned closer, his voice a low murmur. Xiaobei recoiled, shoving Zhuofei away. Stay away from me. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. Zhuofei reached out, catching him before he fell. Don't be shy, beautiful. Concealed in the shadows, Feng Yu watched their interaction unfold, a painful warmth spreading through his chest. Seeing the two of them embracing, a sharp pang of jealousy tore through him. Xiaobei, startled by Zhuofei's sudden embrace, stared at him with wide, confused eyes. He could only imagine the trauma that the brothel incident had inflicted upon Zhuofei. Suppressing his rising anger, Xiaobei pleaded with Feng Yu, "Get me out of here." Zhuofei, feigning embarrassment, explained that he had only been trying to help. Feng Yu, however, accused him of taking advantage of Xiaobei. How could you do that to him? If anything happens to Xiaobei, you'll pay. He stepped forward menacingly. Zhuofei remained unfazed, calmly revealing his superior cultivation. Xiaobei watched in silence as the tension between them escalated. Zhuofei suddenly pushed Feng Yu away. Don't you see? I like you. Why do you keep rejecting me? Feng Yu looked towards the heavens, his expression filled with anguish. My heart belongs to another. I can't return your feelings. With that, he transformed into a streak of light and disappeared, leaving a stunned Xiaobei standing there, utterly bewildered. Zhuofei, seeing the genuine pain in Xiaobei's eyes, felt a twinge of guilt. He hadn't intended for things to escalate to this point. He rushed to apologize. Feng Yu, however, was consumed by jealousy and continued to accuse Zhuofei of playing with Xiaobei's emotions. He reached out, grabbing Zhuofei's shirt, ready to rip away his disguise. Xiaobei caught his hand, stopping him. Feng Yu. Stop. You can't treat a woman like that. He glared at Feng Yu, his eyes blazing with anger. Zhuofei quickly adjusted his clothing, his own eyes now filled with righteous indignation, as he glared at Feng Yu. How dare you? You shameless brute. This only served to further enrage Feng Yu, and he lunged forward again, intent on tearing off Zhuo Fei's disguise. Instinctively, Xiaobei pulled Zhuo Fei closer, shielding him with his body. Stop it, Feng Yu. What are you doing? Feeling Xiaobei's protective embrace, Zhuo Fei leaned into him, his heart pounding. It's all right, beautiful. I won't let him hurt you. Yi Qianming, watching from a distance, groaned in frustration. Zhuo Fei, you idiot. I knew I should have handled this myself. Xiao Zhu, hidden from view, snickered. This is getting interesting. Who doesn't love a good love triangle? Zhuo Fei, emboldened by Xiaobei's protectiveness, continued to glare at Feng Yu, tears streaming down his face. You're despicable. I'll never forgive you for this. Xiaobei, utterly flustered, didn't know what to do. He couldn't abandon Zhuo Fei, but he also couldn't just ignore Feng Yu. He knelt beside Zhuo Fei, his voice laced with concern. Zhuo Fei, are you all right? Did he hurt you? Zhuo Fei, seeing the genuine worry in Xiaobei's eyes, saw an opportunity to further drive a wedge between them. He tore my clothes. Look. He gestured to his slightly disheveled attire. Xiaobei's expression hardened. He turned to Feng Yu, his voice low and dangerous. Feng Yu, you've gone too far. Zhuo Fei, sensing Xiaobei's rising anger, added fuel to the fire. He said he wanted me. He tried to force himself on me. This was the final straw. Xiaobei exploded, his spiritual energy surging as he launched himself at Feng Yu, his fists connecting with brutal force. Caught completely off guard, Feng Yu went down hard. Xiaobei pinned him to the ground, his eyes blazing with fury. How could you? I thought we were friends. Feng Yu, his face bruised and blooded, could only stare up at him, speechless. Xiaobei finally realized the extent of his actions. He released Feng Yu and scrambled back, his face ashen. I didn't mean to. Zhuo Fei, watching the scene unfold, smirked. His plan had worked perfectly. It's all right, beautiful. I understand. It was just a misunderstanding. He extended a hand to help Xiaobei up. Xiaobei, consumed by guilt and confusion, avoided Zhuo Fei's gaze. He knew he'd been manipulated. As Zhuo Fei leaned closer, a wave of cold dread washed over Xiaobei. He scrambled back, bumping into Feng Yu. Stay away from me. He yelled, his voice filled with panic. Feng Yu, his heart aching at Xiaobei's rejection, could only watch as he fled, his figure disappearing into the night. Zhuo Fei's smirk widened. He had finally succeeded. But why, he mused, do I feel this pang of guilt? He'd confessed his love, and Xiaobei had, in a way, reciprocated. He should be elated. Yet, Xiaobei's reaction had been anything but joyful. He'd apologized profusely for Feng Yu's behavior, but Zhuo Fei's attempts to comfort him were met with a cold, distant demeanor. He knew Xiaobei blamed him for Feng Yu's outburst, and this realization intensified his guilt. He had manipulated Xiaobei, and now he was facing the consequences. Meanwhile, Luo Qingtong had returned to the Luo residence. She'd barely registered the changes before. A man suddenly appeared, grabbing her and pulling her into a passionate embrace. Luo Qingtong, mistaking him for Yi Qianming, was about to deliver a swift kick to his groin when the man's words stopped her in her tracks. My darling, why did you leave me? He nuzzled her neck, his voice thick with longing. Luo Qingtong was utterly bewildered. This wasn't Yi Qianming. Who was this man? She pushed him away, her mind racing. The man looked at her with adoration. You're even more beautiful than I imagined. My darling, I've missed you so much. Luo Qingtong was about to make a run for it when a familiar voice echoed in her mind. Master, I'm trapped. It was Zhan Enyu. She couldn't just abandon him. The man, seeing her hesitate, mistook it for shyness. Don't be afraid, my love. I'm here. He reached for her again. Luo Qingtong sidestepped him, her voice laced with amusement. So you're the one who's been following me. Interesting. She caught the strand of hair that had fallen from his grasp as he reached for. Huh? This belongs to you, I believe. The man's face paled. He hadn't expected her to recognize him. Who are you? He stammered. Luo Qingtong chuckled, twirling the hair between her fingers. A nobody. But you, on the other hand. She leaned closer, her voice a low murmur. You're quite the persistent one. Aren't you? She tossed the hair back to him. Be careful. Obsession can be a dangerous thing. She turned and walked away, leaving the man standing there, frozen in place, his mind reeling. You'll regret this. He yelled after her, his voice laced with impotent rage. Luo Qingtong simply chuckled, her laughter echoing in the night. Inside the Luo residence, Luo Lao stood in Luo Qingtong's room, his eyes fixed on the single, flickering candle. Bai Lian had been spreading rumors, claiming Luo Qingtong was responsible for the Luo family's misfortunes, including their father's disappearance. Mark my words. Shed declared. The Luo family will be ruined because of Luo Qingtong. You should all abandon her and pledge your loyalty to me, your rightful second miss. Moments before, they'd been haughty and arrogant, mocking Luo Qingtong for being a cripple. Now, they groveled at her feet, begging for mercy. Luo Qingtong, having just returned from Jiawu Mountain, watched the scene unfold, a cold smile playing on her lips. The men had brought her a fragrant incense, hoping to curry favor. However, she poured the incense onto them, ordering Zhan Enyu to take them away. She then informed Luo Shining that she would be held accountable for the debt she owed to her and the Luo family, promising to collect with interest. Returning to the Luo residence, she found Luo Lao looking pale and lifeless, his eyes devoid of their usual spark. Looking at the weeping servants, she demanded to know what had happened. The servants, terrified, fell to their knees. One of the physicians explained that Luo Lao's cultivation was rapidly dissipating. At this rate, he would soon become a cripple. These words struck Luo Qingtong like a physical blow. She rushed to Luo Lao's side, checking his pulse and examining his condition. His cultivation had indeed fallen to the 6th level of the martial Grand Master realm, and it was still declining. Luo Qingtong's eyes burned with fury. Who could devise such a cruel and insidious method? The physician, his voice trembling, explained that it was Luo Shining's doing. She had taken control of the Luo family after Luo Lao collapsed, and had spread rumors that Luo Qingtong was responsible for his condition. Luo Qingtong didn't believe Luo Shining had the audacity or the intelligence to pull off such a scheme. She suspected the Qianyu royal family was behind it, using Luo Shining as a pawn. Luo Lao suddenly stirred. Seeing Luo Qingtong safe and sound, relief flooded his eyes. He blamed himself for his foolish decision to relinquish control of the family, which had led to this situation. Luo Qingtong, seeing the guilt in his eyes, reassured him. Don't worry, Grandpa. I'll handle everything. Luo Lao smiled weakly, his voice filled with love and gratitude. It's all right, Qingtong. As long as you're safe, nothing else matters. Luo Qingtong's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Luo Lao had sacrificed everything for her, and now it was her turn to protect him. She grasped his hand, her voice firm with conviction. I promise, Grandpa. I'll take care of the Luo family. I'll restore your cultivation, and you'll be even stronger than before. Meanwhile, at Luo Shining's residence, the Luo family plaque had been replaced with a new one. Inside, Bai Lian and her family celebrated, reveling in their newfound power, and gloating over Luo Qingtong's misfortune. She deserves it. It's all her fault. Suddenly, the sound of horses' hooves echoed in the distance. By order of the eldest miss, we're here to arrest the second branch. Clear the way. Bai Lian's mother was livid. Zhan Enyu, his face impassive, raised the warrant. With a powerful swing, he shattered the newly erected plaque. The Luo family members cried out in pain, as they were struck by the force of the blow. Bai Lian was terrified. She hadn't expected a mere guard to be so powerful. Why does Luo Qingtong have such strong guards? Zhan Enyu, ignoring their protests, advanced, the warrant held aloft. Bai Lian and the others scrambled back in fear. Suddenly, Bai Lian's eyes darted towards her father. With a ruthless shove, she pushed him towards Zhan Enyu. As her father stumbled forward, Bai Lian and her mother fled, abandoning him without a second glance. They were clearly willing to sacrifice anyone to save themselves. At the gates of the Luo residence, cries of outrage and shock filled the air. Those captured were imprisoned in the dungeon, but Luo Lao's second son, Luo demanded his release. It turned out he was a loyal follower of Wang Zifeng, and behind him stood the formidable Chen Yu. Fifth Prince, Zhan Enyu informed Luo Qingtong that Bai Lian had fled to the Daqin Shengyuan Academy. Arriving at the dungeon, Luo Qingtong encountered Luo demanding his release. She scoffed. Your own daughter used you as a shield, and you still expect her to come and save you. Luo however, didn't see it that way. He insisted it was all Shining's fault, a misunderstanding between them. His eyes, however, were cold and hard. He wouldn't forgive anyone who had harmed his father, especially those pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Luo Qingtong cursed him. You're pathetic. You'd even use your own father as a pawn. Luo, unrepentant, was about to argue, but Luo Qingtong cut him short. She produced a small vial of medicine, and handed it to Zhan Enyu with a single order. Give it to Luo. She then ordered the guards outside to be released. Luo, hearing this, was bewildered. As the medicine took effect, Luo's power surged uncontrollably. If unleashed, this power would consume him. Left unchecked, it would turn him into a beast. In his despair, Luo screamed, Shining. I'll never forgive you. Luo Qingtong was unmoved. He was merely the first. There were others who would share his fate. Later that night, Luo Qingtong studied a book in her room. Zhan Enyu reported that Luo Shining had returned to the Luo residence. A Qianyu Academy instructor now accompanied her everywhere. Moreover, she had somehow managed to gain the instructor's unwavering loyalty. Intrigued, Luo Qingtong decided to pay them a visit. She instructed Zhan Enyu to compile a list of all the gifts the royal family and nobility had given her over the years. She intended to present it to Bai Lian as a gift. At that moment, Bai Lian was pacing anxiously in her room. She was convinced Luo Qingtong wouldn't let her off easily. Her father was still missing, and it was all Luo Qingtong's fault. As long as that old fool Luo Lao remains ill, she can't do anything to me. But if he recovers and comes looking for me, I'm finished. Bai Lian put on a pitiful fade, seeking comfort and reassurance from Chu Lao. She's so cruel. She has no heart. She's driven me out of the Luo family, and now she won't even let me live in peace. Look at what she's done to the Luo family. It's all her fault. Grandpa's cultivation is declining because of her. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room, interrupting her dramatic performance. A servant stumbled in, trembling, a shattered plaque clutched in his hands. Eldest Miss she smashed the plaque. She's here. Luo Qingtong rode into the courtyard on horseback, her entourage of Zhan Enyu and other guards following close behind. She ordered them to smash the plaque into pieces. She glared at Bai Lian, who stood there, her face pale with fear, still clinging to her pitiful act. Zhan Enyu and the other guards efficiently carried out her orders, reducing the plaque to rubble. The Luo residence belongs to the eldest miss. This plaque has no place here. One of the guards declared. The Luo family servants, terrified, scrambled out of the way. It's a gift from the Qianyu Academy. You can't do this. One of them protested weakly. Luo Qingtong, however, was unmoved. Bai Lian's eyes widened in disbelief. Luo Qingtong. What are you doing? Luo Qingtong and Bai Lian locked eyes, their mutual hatred palpable in the air. Since you've been expelled from the Luo family, you have no right to display this plaque. She gestured to one of her guards, who promptly presented a new plaque. The two characters Dao Fu were carved into the wood, a blatant insult to Bai Lian and her association with the Qianyu Academy. Bai Lian's face contorted with rage. You're my sister. How could you humiliate me like this? Don't you have a conscience? Seeing Bai Lian's crocodile tears, Luo Qingtong only grew angrier. You're my sister. You used our parents' love against me, you stole my resources, you blinded me, and you drove me out of the Luo family. And now you're talking about conscience. Who's the one without a conscience? She slapped Bai Lian hard across the face. Chu Lao, witnessing his beloved disciple being humiliated, surged forward. Stop! He roared, his spiritual energy flaring. You've gone too far. Luo Qingtong, unfazed by his display of power, simply smirked. Oh? And what are you going to do about it? She gestured to the account books that Zhan Enyu had brought. Chu Lao, since you're so eager to defend your precious disciple, why don't you settle these debts for her? She then threw Bai Lian's mother into her arms, causing Bai Lian to stumble and drop the account books in her haste to catch her mother. As Chu Lao scanned the contents of the account books, his face paled. He tried to intervene, but Luo Qingtong cut him off. He insisted that Luo Qingtong had fabricated the accounts, that none of the items listed were ever given to Bai Lian. Luo Qingtong, seeing through his lies, challenged him. Oh really? Then do you dare to let me search your residence? Zhan Enyu immediately stepped forward. Lead the way. Bai Lian, her hopes pinned on Chu Lao, watched with mounting dread as her carefully constructed lies began to unravel. Those were all gifts. You gave them to me. She blurted out, inadvertently incriminating herself. Luo Qingtong pounced on her slip-up. Gifts? Gifts from the Qianyu royal family. Why would I give you gifts meant for me? Do you think you're royalty? Bai Lian was speechless, her face turning an ugly shade of purple. Tears welled up in her eyes. You're just jealous. Jealous that I'm more talented than you. Chu Lao's voice boomed, interrupting her pathetic display. Why did Zhao Mu use your money? Bai Lian insisted that Luo Qingtong had forced her, that she was innocent. Luo Qingtong scoffed. Forced you? Forced you to accept countless treasures. Am I crazy, or are you? She ordered Zhan Enyu to confiscate everything, declaring that anyone who dared to interfere would be considered an enemy of the Qianyu royal family. Bai Lian, realizing she was defeated, turned to Chu Lao for help, begging him to intervene. Chu Lao, his face grim, finally rose to his feet. So, you're resorting to force. All you want is the recommendation and the family heirloom. He then turned his venomous gaze on Luo Qingtong. You dare disrespect Chu Lao. You'll never set foot in the Qianyu Academy. Luo Qingtong shrugged indifferently. That recommendation is useless. It's been used. I don't need it. She could enter the academy on her own merit. She stared pointedly at his jade pendant. Isn't this the engagement gift the fifth prince gave me? Chu Lao's face contorted with rage, as he ripped the pendant from his neck. Bai Lian was rendered speechless, her face a mask of shock and anger. Luo Qingtong burst out laughing, her voice filled with mockery. So, this is your limit. I wonder who's truly at their limit. She slapped Bai Lian hard across the face. Chu Lao had never felt such humiliation. Luo Qingtong, not satisfied with the slap, continued to taunt them. This is what you get. This is the price of your arrogance. She tossed the jade pendant aside and turned to leave, reveling in their impotent rage. I love seeing that helpless look on your faces. You can't touch me. Xiaozu appeared, looking at her with a mixture of awe and amusement. Just then, the engagement ring on Luo Qingtong's finger pulsed with a familiar energy. Luo Qingtong was startled. Xiaozu's eyes widened in fear. The ring. It's been dormant for so long. Why is it reacting now? Luo Qingtong had been berating Bai Lian moments before. Be a good girl and take your medicine. But in a flash, she froze, her body stiffening as the ring pulsed again. What's happening? She wondered, a sense of unease settling over her. Meanwhile, in the dark Nether capital, Yi Qianming was pacing, his mind consumed with thoughts of Luo Qingtong. His return had caused a stir. Feng Yu and Bei Qing had greeted him with respectful bows. Yu Lao, however, couldn't resist teasing him. So, the little vixen finally lured you back, eh? I thought you were a goner. Yi Qianming raised an eyebrow, the dragonstone ring on his finger glinting ominously. Yu Lao was taken aback. He'd thought Yi Qianming had been joking, but had actually returned to the dark Nether capital. Yi Qianming, however, acted as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I simply returned to retrieve something ID left behind. It has nothing to do with her. Yu Lao, his eyes glued to the ring, continued to tease. Don't tell me you came all the way back just for that ring. Looks to me like that little minx has you completely smitten. Xiaobei, emboldened by his master's apparent good mood, piped up, Master Zeisnt like that. Yi Qianming was about to retort when he suddenly froze, his body radiating a chilling aura. Who told you I returned because of her? His voice was dangerously low. Do I need your permission to return to my own home? He glared at them. Do you think my motivations require your approval? Xiaobei stammered, we were just. Yi Qianming's chilling gaze fell upon him. So you assume I came back because of her? She's nothing but he stopped mid-sentence, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Yu Lao, realizing something was amiss, stepped forward, his voice laced with concern. Master, your face is flushed. It's quite warm in here. Are you all right? Yi Qianming's flush deepened. He snapped, nonsense. Imperfectly fine. He glared at Xiaobei. What are you looking at? He spun around and stormed off, Yu Lao's eyes widened in surprise. He had never seen his master so flustered. He turned to Feng Yu. Did he just blush? Could it be? Zhou Fei, who had been lurking nearby, smirked to himself. Looks like someone's got it bad. The next day, while Yi Qianming was still asleep, Luo Qingtong crept into his room. She found him curled up on the bed, his face buried in the pillows, his small form looking incredibly vulnerable. She was filled with a sudden, inexplicable tenderness. Quietly, she pulled the blanket up to cover him. A low, husky voice startled her. What are you doing? Luo Qingtong's heart leaped into her throat. She turned to see Yi Qianming watching her, his eyes half closed, his expression sleepy but alert. Just checking on you, she replied, trying to sound casual. She busied herself with tidying up the room. Don't lie, Yi Qianming mumbled, his voice still thick with sleep. I know you're worried about me. Luo Qingtong's cheeks flushed. She wasn't worried about him. She was just curious about his strange injuries. It's my duty as a physician to care for my patients, she retorted, trying to maintain a professional demeanor. Really? Yi Qianming raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in his eyes. Then tell me, why are you blushing? Luo Qingtong was flustered. I'm not blushing. It's just warm in here. She turned away, avoiding his gaze. Yi Qianming chuckled, pulling her closer. Come here, he murmured, his voice low and husky. Let me show you how much I appreciate your concern. Luo Qingtong's eyes widened in alarm. What are you doing? She squeaked, trying to wriggle free. Yi Qianming's grip tightened. What does it look like I'm doing? He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. I'm going to ravish you, of course. Luo Qingtong's mind went blank. This wasn't happening. She was dreaming, right? She struggled against him, but his grip was surprisingly strong. Yi Qianming chuckled, his breath ghosting over her skin. Such a feisty little thing. I like that. He suddenly flipped her over, pinning her beneath him. Luo Qingtong's eyes widened in alarm. Yi Qianming. Let me go. He leaned closer, his lips brushing against hers. Not a chance, he whispered, his voice a low growl. You're mine now. Luo Qingtong's mind was screaming. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She was supposed to be in control. She had underestimated this miniature version of Ming Zun. He was stronger than he looked. Just as his lips were about to capture hers, a loud knock echoed through the room. Xiao Qianming. Are you in there? It was Chu Lingfeng's voice. Yi Qianming's face fell. Damn it. He glared at Luo Qingtong, his eyes filled with frustration. You're lucky this time. He rolled off of her and sat up, smoothing down his rumpled clothes. Luo Qingtong scrambled to her feet, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and something else. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. As Chu Lingfeng burst into the room, Yi Qianming quickly composed himself, his expression returning to its usual aloof indifference. Chu Lingfeng's eyes widened as he took in the scene. He had barged in, expecting to find Xiao Qianming alone, but the sight that greeted him was unexpected. Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianming sat on the bed, their clothes disheveled, their faces flushed. The atmosphere in the room was charged, thick with an undeniable tension. Chu Lingfeng stammered, I didn't mean to interrupt. He backed away slowly, his face burning with embarrassment. Yi Qianming, his cheeks still slightly flushed, quickly recovered his composure. It's nothing, he said dismissively. We were just discussing some matters. Luo Qingtong, however, was not as quick to recover. Her cheeks were still burning, and her heart was pounding in her chest. She couldn't deny the strange flutter of excitement that coursed through her veins. She had almost been. She quickly pushed the thought away, scolding herself for such inappropriate thoughts. This was Ming Zun, the man who wanted to capture her. Yi Qianming's sharp gaze caught her blushing, and he smirked. So, you were affected, he mused, his voice a low murmur. Interesting. Luo Qingtong glared at him, her cheeks burning even brighter. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped. It was just surprise. That's all. Yi Qianming chuckled, enjoying her flustered state. He stood up and walked towards Chu Lingfeng, his demeanor shifting back to his usual aloof indifference. What is it? Chu Lingfeng explained that he needed Luo Qingtong's assistance with something urgent. had received news that the leader of the assassins, who had attacked them, had been spotted in Fengling City. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed. That's interesting, she mused, a dangerous glint in her eyes. It seems they are not giving up so easily. She turned to Yi Qianming. Her expression serious. I need to leave. Will you be all right on your own? Yi Qianming's heart skipped a beat. She was concerned about him. He almost smiled. It'll be fine, he reassured her, his voice gentle. You go. Be careful, Luo Qingtong nodded, turning to leave. Just as she reached the door, she paused, glancing back at him. Don't do anything reckless, she warned, her voice soft. I don't want to have to save you again. Yi Qianming's heart swelled with warmth. She truly did care about him. A small smile played on his lips. Don't worry, he replied, his voice laced with amusement. It'll be good. Luo Qingtong left, her mind a whirl of confusing emotions. She couldn't deny the strange pull she felt towards this miniature version of Ming Zun. It was unsettling. Xiaozu materialized beside her, his round face creased with worry. Master, what are you going to do? If those assassins find out who you really are, we're in trouble. Luo Qingtong shrugged, her expression nonchalant. They only know me as Yi Guitong, not the Luo Qingtong from Jiawu Mountain. Besides, we have Feng Yu. Xiaozu was not reassured. That Feng Yu's a lovesick fool. He's completely useless. He's probably off mooning over Zwafei somewhere. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. He has his uses. Trust me. Suddenly, a loud commotion erupted in the distance. Luo Qingtong and Xiaozu exchanged glances. What was that? As they approached the source of the commotion, they saw a group of people gathered around a young man, who was being brutally beaten. Luo Qingtong's blood ran cold. It was Chu Lingfeng. Stop! She roared, her voice filled with fury. She pushed through the crowd, her eyes blazing with anger, as she reached Chu Lingfeng's side. Who did this? The attackers, startled by her sudden appearance, turned to face her. They were all students from the Qianyu Academy, their faces contorted with disdain. So it's you, one of them sneered. The trash from the trash class. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed dangerously. You'll pay for this, she hissed, her voice dangerously low. Xiaozu, seeing the murderous glint in her eyes, gulped. Master, calm down. These are all elites from the academy. We can't afford to make enemies of them. Luo Qingtong ignored him, her focus solely on the students who had dared to harm Chu Lingfeng. Get out of my sight, she commanded, her voice dripping with venom. Before I lose my patience. The students, sensing the dangerous aura emanating from her, hesitated. Just as they were about to attack, a voice echoed through the courtyard. What's going on here? Everyone turned to see a tall, imposing figure approaching them. It was Yi Qianming. Luo Qingtong's heart leaped into her throat. Why was he here? Yi Qianming's eyes swept over the scene, landing on Luo Qingtong and the injured Chu Lingfeng. His expression hardened. Luo Qingtong, he said, his voice cold and hard. What have you done? Luo Qingtong was about to explain when one of the students spoke up, his voice filled with indignation. Master Yi, this woman attacked us. She's a menace. She needs to be taught a lesson. Yi Qianming's gaze shifted to the student, his eyes narrowing dangerously. Is that so? He said, his voice dangerously low. Then tell me, why were you attacking Chu Lingfeng? The student stammered, unable to meet his gaze. He insulted us. He called us trash. Yi Qianming's lips curled into a sneer. And you think that justifies your actions? Attacking someone weaker than you. You call yourselves elites. You're a disgrace to the academy. He turned his attention back to Luo Qingtong, his expression softening slightly. Are you all right? He asked, his voice gentle. Luo Qingtong nodded, her heart still pounding in her chest. She was relieved he hadn't immediately condemned her. Yi Qianming turned back to the students, his voice regaining its icy edge. As for you, he gestured towards Chu Lingfeng. Apologize. Now, the students, their faces pale with fear, quickly knelt and apologized to Chu Lingfeng. Yi Qianming turned and left without another word, his hand brushing against Luo Qingtong's as he passed. A shiver ran down her spine at his touch. She watched him go, her mind in turmoil. Why had he defended her? Why did his touch affect her so? She was starting to lose her grip on reality. Xiaozu materialized beside her, his brow furrowed with worry. Master, what are we going to do? This is bad. Very bad. If Mingzun finds out about this, Luo Qingtong waved him off, forcing a smile. Relax. It'll be fine. He won't find out, but even as she said the words, she knew they were empty. She had a feeling this was just the beginning. That night, Luo Qingtong was tossing and turning in her bed, unable to sleep. The events of the day kept replaying in her mind. Yi Qianming's touch, his voice. His concerned expression. She was going crazy. Suddenly, she sat up, her eyes wide with realization. He likes me. She exclaimed, her voice a mix of shock and excitement. He actually likes me. Xiaozu, startled by her outburst, grumbled, of course he likes you. He's been chasing you all over the continent. What did you think was going on? Luo Qingtong ignored him, her mind racing. She had been so focused on escaping him, on avoiding his capture, that she hadn't realized. She smiled, a genuine, happy smile that reached her eyes. He likes me. She repeated the words, savoring them. Xiaozu rolled his eyes. And you like him? Just admit it already. Luo Qingtong's smile faltered. Did she? Did she like Yi Qianming? She thought about his gentle touch, his concerned gaze, the way he had defended her. A warmth spread through her chest. Maybe she did. The next morning, Luo Qingtong visited Yi Qianming again. He was still asleep, his small form curled up on the bed, looking incredibly vulnerable. She sat beside him, watching him sleep, her heart filled with a strange mix of tenderness and anxiety. You're really something else, she murmured, brushing a stray strand of hair from his forehead. Yi Qianming stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at her, a sleepy smile gracing his lips. What are you doing here? Luo Qingtong's cheeks flushed. I just wanted to check on you. Yi Qianming chuckled, his voice still thick with sleep. You worry too much, he said, reaching out to take her hand. Luo Qingtong's heart skipped a beat at his touch. She pulled her hand away, flustered. Don't be ridiculous. I'm just concerned. As a physician, it's my duty to care for my patients. Yi Qianming smiled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Is that so? He sat up, his gaze intent on her face. Then tell me, why are you blushing? Luo Qingtong was speechless. She couldn't deny it. She was blushing. She turned away, avoiding his gaze. It's warm in here, she mumbled, her cheeks burning. Yi Qianming chuckled, his amusement evident in his voice. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. Really? Then why are your hands so cold? Luo Qingtong shivered at his closeness. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She was losing control. She had to get out of here. I need to leave. She stammered, pulling away from him. Yi Qianming's hand shot out, grasping her wrist. Not so fast, he said, his voice a low growl. We have some unfinished business. Luo Qingtong's eyes widened in alarm. What unfinished business? Yi Qianming pulled her closer, his eyes locked on hers. This, he whispered, his lips brushing against hers. Luo Qingtong's mind went blank, as his lips captured hers in a searing kiss. She melted against him, her body responding instinctively to his touch. After a long, breathless moment, he pulled away, his eyes dark with desire. Now, he murmured, his voice husky. Tell me your real name. Luo Qingtong stared at him, her mind reeling. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She had kissed Mingzun. And she had liked it. Luo Qingtong, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Yi Qianming's eyes widened slightly. Luo Qingtong. He repeated, testing the name on his tongue. So, that's who you are. A slow smile spread across his face. Interesting. Luo Qingtong's heart pounded in her chest. She had a feeling things were about to get even more complicated. Just then, a commotion erupted outside. Shouts and screams echoed through the air. Yi Qianming's expression hardened. What's going on? He jumped out of bed and rushed to the window. Luo Qingtong followed close behind, her heart pounding with a sense of foreboding. They saw a group of people battling fiercely in the courtyard below. The air crackled with spiritual energy, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Who are they? Luo Qingtong asked, her voice barely a whisper. Yi Qianming's eyes narrowed as he recognized the attackers. Assassins, he said, his voice grim. From the Jizun organization. Luo Qingtong's blood ran cold. They had found her. Yi Qianming turned to her, his expression filled with concern. Stay here. I'll deal with them. Luo Qingtong shook her head, her eyes blazing with determination. No. I'm coming with you. Yi Qianming's brow furrowed in concern. No. It's too dangerous. Luo Qingtong's voice was firm. I can handle myself. Besides, I owe you. She wasn't about to let him face these assassins alone, not after everything he'd done for her. Yi Qianming hesitated, torn between protecting her and accepting her help. He knew she was strong, but these were Jizun assassins, some of the deadliest killers on the continent. Seeing his hesitation, Luo Qingtong smiled, a reassuring smile that reached her eyes. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Let's go. With that, she grabbed his hand and pulled him towards the door. Yi Qianming's heart pounded in his chest as their fingers intertwined. He couldn't deny the warmth that spread through him at her touch. He allowed her to lead him. A strange sense of peace settling over him despite the impending danger. As they burst out of the room, they were met with a scene of utter chaos. Assassins clad in black swarmed the courtyard, their movements swift and deadly. The air crackled with spiritual energy. As they clashed with the royal guards, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Without hesitation, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianming joined the fray. Luo Qingtong, activating her soul technique, moved like a phantom, her attacks precise and deadly. Each strike brought down an assassin, their bodies falling lifelessly to the ground. Yi Qianming, his strength amplified by Luo Qingtong's earlier power transfer, fought with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed. His movements were fluid and graceful. Yet each strike carried the force of a thunderclap. Xiaozu, meanwhile, was having a panic attack. Master! These guys are crazy. We're going to die. Luo Qingtong, her focus on the battle, didn't even spare him a glance. If you're so scared, then go hide in the pagoda. She yelled, her voice barely audible above the din of the fighting. Xiaozu, his pride wounded, puffed out his chest. I'm not afraid. I'm just observing. Gathering intel. He then proceeded to hide behind a large pillar, peeking out cautiously every few seconds. The battle raged on, the courtyard littered with the bodies of fallen assassins and guards. The leader of the assassins, a tall, imposing figure clad in black, watched the scene unfold with a cold, calculating gaze. They are stronger than we anticipated. He mused, his voice a low growl. But they won't win. He raised his hand, and a group of assassins broke away from the main fight, moving towards Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianming. They were the elite, the deadliest of the Jizun organization. Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianming, sensing the shift in the battle, exchanged glances. They are targeting us, Luo Qingtong said, her voice grim. Yi Qianming nodded, his eyes narrowed in concentration. We need to take them down quickly. They fought back-to-back, their movements perfectly synchronized, their combined strength a force to be reckoned with. But the elite assassins were relentless, their attacks precise and coordinated. They pushed Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianming to their limits. Luo Qingtong, her strength beginning to wane, stumbled, her vision blurring. I can't, she gasped, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Yi Qianming, seeing her falter, felt a surge of protectiveness. He wouldn't let them harm her. He wouldn't. With a roar, he unleashed his full power, his spiritual energy exploding outwards in a blinding flash of light. The elite assassins were thrown back, their bodies slamming against the walls of the courtyard. Luo Qingtong stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. He was magnificent. The power he wielded was awe-inspiring, but his victory was short-lived. The leader of the assassins, seeing his opportunity, struck, his attack swift and deadly. Yi Qianming cried out as the attack pierced his chest. His body falling lifelessly to the ground. No! Luo Qingtong screamed, her voice filled with anguish. She rushed to his side, her heart pounding in her chest. Yi Qianming. Wake up. Please. Tears streamed down her face, as she cradled his lifeless body in her arms. He had sacrificed himself for her. He had. A wave of grief so intense it threatened to consume her washed over Luo Qingtong. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She could only hold him, her tears falling onto his cold, still face. Xiaozu, seeing his master's despair, whimpered, his small form trembling. He didn't know what to do. He had never seen her like this. Suddenly, a voice echoed in Luo Qingtong's mind. Don't give up, master. He's not dead. It was Xiaobai, the little fox she had contracted with. Luo Qingtong's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. What do you mean? His soul is still intact. But his body is severely damaged. You need to act quickly. Luo Qingtong didn't hesitate. She quickly gathered her medicinal herbs and began to work, her fingers moving with practiced ease, as she prepared the medicine that would save his life. As she worked, she poured all her remaining strength and spiritual energy into him, hoping against hope that it would be enough. Time seemed to stretch on forever, as she worked tirelessly, her focus solely on the man lying lifeless in her arms. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Yi Qianming stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at her, his gaze confused and disoriented. What happened? Luo Qingtong's heart soared with relief. He was alive. She had saved him. Tears streamed down her face as she threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. You're alive, she sobbed, her voice thick with emotion. You're alive. Yi Qianming, still weak and disoriented, could only hold her, his mind slowly piecing together the events that had led to this moment. He had been attacked. Luo Qingtong had saved him. He looked down at her, his heart swelling with warmth and gratitude. Thank you, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Thank you for saving me. Luo Qingtong pulled away, her cheeks flushed, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Don't mention it, she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. It was my duty. Yi Qianming chuckled weakly, his hand reaching up to gently caress her cheek. Your duty? He repeated, a playful glint in his eyes. To kiss me and give me your power. Luo Qingtong's blush deepened. It was necessary. She retorted, flustered. You were dying. Yi Qianming's smile widened. Is that so? He teased, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Perhaps I should pretend to be injured more often. Luo Qingtong rolled her eyes, but she couldn't help but smile back. She was just glad he was alive. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over her, and her vision went black. She swayed, her body collapsing against Yi Qianming's. Luo Qingtong. Yi Qianming cried out, his arms tightening around her as he caught her. He looked down at her unconscious form, his brow furrowed with concern. What's wrong? Is it the poison? Xiaozu materialized beside them, his round face creased with worry. Master. She's exhausted. She pushed herself too hard to save you. Yi Qianming's gaze softened as he looked at Luo Qingtong. He gently lifted her into his arms and carried her back to her room, laying her down on the bed. He watched over her. His heart filled with a mix of gratitude and something else. Something he couldn't quite name. As he watched her sleep, he couldn't help but wonder about her. Who was she really? What secrets did she hold? And why did he feel this strange pull towards her, this undeniable connection? Back at the Luo residence, the servants were celebrating Luo Qingtong's victory over Bai Lian and Chu Lao. Luo Lao, his health slowly improving, had resumed his position as head of the family. He was overjoyed to hear of his granddaughter's triumph, his heart filled with pride and love. Bai Lian, defeated and humiliated, had returned to her own courtyard, her face a mask of rage and resentment. She swore she would have her revenge. She would make Luo Qingtong pay for everything she had done. Meanwhile, news of Ziyi Guitong's exploits had spread like wildfire throughout the Qianyu Empire. His reputation as a brilliant physician and formation master had reached even the ears of the emperor himself, who was intrigued and summoned him to the palace. Luo Qingtong, unaware of the emperor's interest, was focused on her own plans. She knew the Qianyu royal family was not to be trusted, and she was determined to uncover their secrets and expose their treachery. As she made her way to the palace, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. But she had come too far to turn back now. She would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Upon arriving at the palace, she was greeted by the emperor himself, who welcomed her warmly and showered her with praise. Luo Qingtong, however, remained wary. Her eyes scanning the opulent surroundings, searching for any signs of deception. The emperor, sensing her apprehension, chuckled. You seem nervous, Master Ziyi. Is there something wrong? Luo Qingtong smiled politely. Your Majesty is too kind. I am merely overwhelmed by your generosity. The Emperor's smile widened. Nonsense. You deserve all the praise you've received. Your skills are truly remarkable. He paused, his gaze becoming more intent. I have a proposition for you, Master Ziyi. A proposition that I believe you will find most interesting. Luo Qingtong's heart pounded in her chest. She had a feeling she wasn't going to like this proposition. Back at the academy, Xiao Qianming was growing impatient. Luo Qingtong had been gone for days, and he was starting to worry. He paced restlessly in his room. His small form a bundle of nervous energy. Xiao Zhu, seeing his master's distress, tried to comfort him. Don't worry, master. She'll be fine. She's strong. She can take care of herself. Xiao Qianming glared at him. That's easy for you to say. You're not the one who's attached to her. He didn't realize he had spoken his thoughts aloud. His cheeks flushed crimson. Xiao Zhu's eyes widened in surprise. Master Yuyo, he didn't dare finish his sentence. Xiao Qianming, realizing his slip-up, quickly backtracked. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just worried about her. As her protector, it's my duty to ensure her safety. Xiao Zhu, however, was not fooled. He knew his master harbored deeper feelings for Luo Qingtong. He just hoped those feelings weren't reciprocated. He patted Xiao Qianming's head, his voice gentle. Don't worry, master. She'll be back soon. But even as he said the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had a bad premonition. Luo Qingtong, meanwhile, was listening to the Emperor's proposition, her expression carefully neutral. He wanted her to become the imperial physician, to serve the royal family exclusively. In return, he offered her power, wealth, and prestige beyond her wildest dreams. Luo Qingtong's mind raced. This was a tempting offer, but she knew it was a trap. The Qianyu royal family was corrupt and deceitful. She couldn't trust them. Your Majesty is too kind, she said, her voice smooth and polite. But I'm afraid I must decline your generous offer. I am not suited for such a position. The Emperor's smile faltered. Is that so? He leaned forward, his gaze intense. Are you certain, Master Ziyi? You're rejecting power, wealth, and a life of luxury. Are you sure you've thought this through? Luo Qingtong's voice remained firm. I am certain, Your Majesty. The Emperor's eyes narrowed dangerously. Very well, he said, his voice laced with a veiled threat. But I hope you won't regret this decision. Luo Qingtong bowed her head respectfully. I won't, Your Majesty. But even as she said the words, she knew she was playing a dangerous game. As she left the palace, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, but she saw no one. She quickened her pace, eager to get away from the suffocating atmosphere of the palace. Back at the academy, Xiao Qianming was growing more and more anxious. Luo Qingtong's prolonged absence was driving him crazy. He couldn't focus on anything, his mind filled with images of her. He was starting to think he was losing his mind. He paced his room restlessly, muttering to himself, where is she? Why hasn't she returned? What if something happened to her? Xiao Zhu, observing his master's distress, tried to reassure him. Don't worry, master. She'll be back. She always is. Xiao Qianming rounded on him, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anxiety and frustration. That's easy for you to say. You're not the one who. He stopped abruptly. His cheeks flushing crimson. He hadn't meant to say that aloud. Xiao Zhu's eyes widened in surprise. Master Yuyo, he trailed off, not daring to complete his sentence. Xiao Qianming, realizing his slip-up, quickly tried to cover it up. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just concerned about her well-being. As her protector, I have a duty to ensure her safety. Xiao Zhu, however, was not fooled. He knew his master's feelings for Luo Qingtong ran deeper than mere concern. He just hoped those feelings were not reciprocated. He patted Xiao Qianming on the head, his voice soothing. Don't you worry, master. She'll be back soon. But even as he said the words, a knot of unease tightened in his gut. He had a bad feeling about this. He hoped he was wrong. Luo Qingtong, having successfully evaded the emperor's watchful gaze, was now making her way back to the academy. As she neared the gates, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the shadows, but she saw nothing. Just my imagination, she muttered to herself, dismissing her unease. As she entered her room, she saw Xiao Qianming pacing back and forth, his small form radiating anxiety. "Luo Qingtong!" he exclaimed, rushing towards her. "Where have you been? I was so worried." Luo Qingtong's heart softened at his concern. She smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile that reached her eyes. "I'm fine," she reassured him. "I just had some business to attend to." Xiao Qianming's brow furrowed. "What kind of business? Why didn't you tell me? I thought something had happened to you." Luo Qingtong's smile faltered. She couldn't tell him the truth, not yet. "It's complicated," she said evasively. "I'll explain later." Xiao Qianming's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Complicated? What's so complicated that you can't even tell me?" Luo Qingtong sighed. "It's about the Qianyu royal family," she said, choosing her words carefully. "I can't say more than that, not now." Xiao Qianming's eyes widened in alarm. "The Qianyu royal family? What do they want with you?" Luo Qingtong's expression turned grim. "They want me to work for them. To be their personal physician." Xiao Qianming's jaw dropped. "Their personal physician? But why?" Luo Qingtong shrugged. "They seem to think him talented," she said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. "They offered me power, wealth, and a life of luxury. Everything I could ever want." Xiao Qianming stared at her, his mind reeling. "And you refused?" Luo Qingtong nodded. "Of course I refused. I wouldn't work for them, not even if they offered me the world. They are corrupt and deceitful. I can't trust them." Xiao Qianming's heart swelled with pride. He had known she wouldn't accept their offer. She was too strong, too independent, to be anyone's pawn. He reached out, taking her hand in his. "I'm glad you refused," he said, his voice soft and sincere. "I wouldn't want you to be involved with them." Luo Qingtong's heart skipped a beat at his touch. A warm, fuzzy feeling spread through her chest. She looked at him, her eyes softening. "Thank you," she whispered. "For worrying about me." Xiao Qianming's cheeks flushed slightly. "It's nothing," he mumbled, looking away. "It's my duty to protect you." Luo Qingtong smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "I know," she said, her voice filled with warmth and affection. "And I appreciate it." Xiao Qianming's blush deepened. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. He could only stare at her, his heart pounding in his chest. Luo Qingtong, noticing his flustered state, chuckled. "Don't worry," she teased, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "I'm not going anywhere." Xiao Qianming's heart soared at her words. He wanted to believe her, he truly did. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. He was right. The very next day, a message arrived from the Qianyu royal family. The emperor had been poisoned, and they wanted Ziyi Guitong to cure him. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed as she read the message. It was a trap. She knew it. The Qianyu royal family was trying to force her hand. They knew she wouldn't refuse a request to save the emperor's life. It was a clever move, but she wouldn't fall for it. Xiaozu, seeing the dangerous glint in her eyes, gulped. "Master, what are we going to do? This is bad. Very bad. If we go to the palace, we're walking right into their trap." Luo Qingtong's lips curled into a cold smile. "I know it's a trap. But I'm going anyway." Xiaozu's eyes widened in disbelief. "Master, are you crazy? Why would you walk into a trap?" Luo Qingtong's voice was calm, her expression unwavering. "Because I have my own plans. And this trap is the perfect opportunity to put those plans into action." Xiaozu, still apprehensive, could only nod. He trusted his master, even if he didn't understand her methods. Luo Qingtong made her preparations, gathering her medicinal herbs and tools. She knew this wouldn't be an easy task. The emperor's poison was likely rare and potent. She would need all her skills and knowledge to cure him. As she made her way to the palace, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into the lion's den. But she refused to show any fear. She would face the Qianyu royal family head-on. And she would emerge victorious. Upon arriving at the palace, she was escorted to the emperor's chambers, where he lay pale and weak, his breathing shallow and labored. The room was filled with anxious courtiers and physicians. Their faces etched with worry. Luo Qingtong approached the emperor's bedside, her expression calm and professional, as she began her examination. She carefully checked his pulse, examined his eyes, and studied his complexion. The emperor's poison was indeed potent, a rare and complex concoction that had baffled the imperial physicians. But Luo Qingtong was not deterred. She had encountered far more challenging poisons. In her past life, she would find a cure. As she worked, she noticed a familiar presence in the room. It was Yi Qianming. He stood near the back, his gaze fixed intently on her, his expression unreadable. Luo Qingtong's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly composed herself, her focus returning to the task at hand. She couldn't afford any distractions, not now. After hours of meticulous work, Luo Qingtong finally identified the components of the poison and prepared the antidote. It was a risky procedure, but she was confident in her abilities. As she administered the antidote, the room fell silent, everyone holding their breath, their eyes fixed on the emperor. Slowly, the emperor's color began to return, his breathing becoming deeper and more regular. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Luo Qingtong, exhausted but satisfied, stepped back from the bedside. She had done it. She had saved the emperor. The emperor, his strength slowly returning, looked at Luo Qingtong, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Master Ziyi," he said, his voice weak but sincere. "You have saved my life." Luo Qingtong bowed her head respectfully. "It was my duty, Your Majesty." The emperor smiled, his gaze becoming more intent. "Your duty? Or perhaps something more?" Luo Qingtong's heart skipped a beat. What did he mean by that? The emperor continued, his voice a low murmur. "I've heard rumors, Master Ziyi. Rumors about your relationship with Ming Zun." Luo Qingtong's blood ran cold. How did he know? She had been so careful to keep their relationship a secret. She forced a smile, her voice calm and steady. "Your Majesty must be mistaken. I have no relationship with Ming Zun." The emperor chuckled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Is that so? Perhaps. But I have a feeling you're not being entirely truthful with me." Luo Qingtong's mind raced. She had to get out of here, before he discovered the truth. "I assure you, Your Majesty, there is nothing between Ming Zun and me," she said, her voice firm. The emperor's smile vanished. "Very well," he said, his voice cold and hard. "But if I discover you're lying to me, Master Ziyi, you will face the consequences." Luo Qingtong bowed her head again. "I understand, Your Majesty." As she left the palace, she could feel the emperor's gaze burning into her back. She knew she had just made a powerful enemy. Back at the academy, Xiao Qianming was pacing anxiously in his room, his small form radiating nervous energy. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had a bad premonition about Luo Qingtong's trip to the palace. Xiao Zhu, seeing his master's distress, tried to comfort him. "Don't worry, Master. She'll be fine. She's resourceful. She can handle anything." Xiao Qianming glared at him, his voice filled with frustration. "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one who's." He stopped abruptly, his cheeks flushing crimson. Xiao Zhu's eyes widened. "Master Yu," he didn't dare finish his sentence. Xiao Qianming, realizing his slip-up, quickly covered. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just worried about her safety. As her protector, it's my duty to ensure her well-being." Xiao Zhu, however, saw through his master's flimsy excuse. He knew Xiao Qianming's feelings ran deeper than mere concern. He just hoped those feelings weren't reciprocated. It would only complicate things further. He patted Xiao Qianming's head reassuringly. "Don't worry, Master. She'll be back soon." But even as he said the words, he felt a knot of unease in his stomach. He hoped he was wrong. Luo Qingtong returned to the academy, exhausted but relieved. She had successfully navigated the emperor's trap and cured his poison. But she knew this was just the beginning of her troubles. The Qianyu royal family wouldn't give up so easily. As she entered her room, she saw Xiao Qianming waiting for her, his small form tense with worry. "Luo Qingtong!" he exclaimed, rushing towards her. Where have you been? I was so worried. Luo Qingtong's heart melted at his concern. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I'm fine, she reassured him. I just had to take care of something. Xiao Qianming frowned, his eyes filled with suspicion. What kind of something? Why didn't you tell me where you were going? I thought something had happened to you. Luo Qingtong sighed. She couldn't tell him the truth, not yet. It's complicated, she said evasively. I'll explain everything later. Xiao Qianming's eyes narrowed. Complicated? What's so complicated that you can't even tell me? Luo Qingtong hesitated for a moment, then said, it involves the Qianyu royal family. Xiao Qianming's eyes widened in alarm. The Qianyu royal family. What did they do to you? Are you all right? Luo Qingtong's expression turned grim. They wanted me to become the imperial physician, she explained. To serve them exclusively. Xiao Qianming's jaw dropped. The imperial physician. But why? Luo Qingtong shrugged. They seem to think I have talent, she said, a hint of bitterness lacing her tone. They offered me power, wealth, a life of luxury, everything I could ever desire. Xiao Qianming stared at her, his mind reeling. And you refused? Luo Qingtong nodded. Of course, I refused. I would never work for them, not even if they offered me the world. They are corrupt and deceitful. I don't trust them. Xiao Qianming's heart swelled with pride. He knew she wouldn't accept. She was too strong, too independent, to become anyone's pawn. He took her hand, his voice soft and sincere. I'm glad you refused. I wouldn't want you to be entangled with them. Luo Qingtong's heart skipped a beat at his touch. A warm, comforting sensation spread through her. She met his gaze, her own eyes softening. Thank you, she whispered. For caring. Xiao Qianming's cheeks flushed slightly. It's nothing, he mumbled, looking away. It's my duty to protect you. Luo Qingtong smiled, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. I know, she replied, her voice warm with affection. And I appreciate it. Xiao Qianming's blush deepened. He longed to say something, anything, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. He could only gaze at her, his heart pounding against his ribs. Luo Qingtong, noticing his flustered state, chuckled softly. Don't worry, she teased, her eyes sparkling with amusement. I'm not going anywhere. Xiao Qianming's spirit soared at her words. He desperately wanted to believe her, but a nagging feeling of unease lingered in the back of his mind. He couldn't shake the premonition that something was about to happen, something that would change everything between them. He was right. The very next day, a messenger arrived bearing a message from the Qianyu royal family. The emperor had been poisoned, and they demanded Ziyi Guitong's presence to administer the cure. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed as she read the message. She knew it was a trap. The Qianyu royal family was trying to force her hand. They were banking on her inability to refuse a plea to save the emperor's life. It was a calculated move, a clever tactic, but she wouldn't fall for it. Not this time. Xiao Zhu, seeing the dangerous glint in her eyes, swallowed nervously. Master, what are we going to do? This is bad, very bad. We walk into that palace, we're walking into a trap. A death trap. Luo Qingtong's lips curved into a cold, predatory smile. I know it's a trap, Xiao Zhu. But we're going anyway. Xiao Zhu stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. Master. Are you mad? Why would we willingly walk into danger? Luo Qingtong's voice was calm and steady, her gaze unwavering. Because I have my own agenda, Xiao Zhu. And this trap is the perfect opportunity to put my plans in motion. Xiao Zhu, though still apprehensive, could only nod. He had learned to trust his master's judgment, even when her methods seemed reckless, even insane. Luo Qingtong made her preparations, carefully gathering her medicinal herbs, tools, and ingredients. She knew this wouldn't be a simple task. The emperor's poison was likely a rare and potent concoction. Something that would challenge even her considerable skills. She would need every ounce of her knowledge and experience to succeed. As her carriage made its way towards the imposing palace gates, a sense of foreboding settled over her. She knew she was walking into the lion's den, a place of danger and deceit. But she refused to show any fear. She would face the Qianyu royal family, and she would not be broken. Upon arrival, she was immediately ushered into the emperor's chambers. He lay pale and still upon the ornate bed, his breathing shallow and ragged. The air was thick with tension. The faces of the assembled courtiers and physicians etched with worry and fear. Luo Qingtong approached the bedside, her demeanor calm and collected. She began her examination, her movements precise and efficient as she checked his pulse, examined his eyes, and studied his complexion. The emperor's poison was as potent as Shed suspected, a rare and complex concoction that had baffled the imperial physicians. But Luo Qingtong was not intimidated. She had faced far more challenging toxins in her past life. She would find a cure. As she worked, she noticed a familiar presence at the edge of the room. It was Yi Qianming. He stood silently, his gaze fixed intently upon her, his expression unreadable. Luo Qingtong's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly regained her composure, pushing aside her distracting thoughts and refocusing on the task at hand. After hours of painstaking work, she finally identified all the components of the complex poison and began preparing the antidote. It was a dangerous procedure, fraught with risk, but she had unwavering faith in her abilities. A hushed silence fell over the room as she administered the antidote. Every eye was on the emperor, every breath held in anticipation. Slowly, color returned to the emperor's ashen face, his breathing deepening and becoming more regular. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, the tension easing slightly. Luo Qingtong, utterly exhausted but deeply satisfied, stepped away from the bedside. She had done it. She had saved the emperor's life. The emperor, his strength gradually returning, looked at Luo Qingtong, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Master Ziyi," he said, his voice weak but sincere. "You have saved my life." Luo Qingtong bowed her head respectfully. "It was my duty, Your Majesty." The emperor smiled, his gaze sharpening. "Duty? Or perhaps something more?" Luo Qingtong froze, her blood turning to ice. What did he mean? The emperor's voice dropped to a low, almost conspiratorial murmur. "I've heard rumors, Master Ziyi. Rumors about your association with Ming Zun." Luo Qingtong's heart plummeted to her stomach. How did he know? She had been so careful, so discreet. She forced a smile, keeping her voice level and calm. "Your Majesty is mistaken. There's nothing between Ming Zun and myself." The emperor chuckled, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Is that so? Perhaps. But I have a feeling you're not being entirely truthful with me, Master Ziyi." Luo Qingtong's mind raced. She had to get out of here, before he discovered the truth. "I assure Your Majesty, there's absolutely nothing between Ming Zun and me," she reiterated firmly. The emperor's smile vanished, his expression turning cold and hard. "Very well. But if I discover you're lying, Master Ziyi, you will face the consequences." Luo Qingtong bowed her head respectfully. "I understand, Your Majesty." As she left the palace, she could feel the weight of the emperor's gaze on her back. She knew she had made a powerful enemy. And she knew this wasn't over. Back at the academy, Xiao Qianming was a whirlwind of nervous energy, pacing his room restlessly. He couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over him since Luo Qingtong left for the palace. He had a terrible premonition. Xiao Zhu, witnessing his master's anxiety, attempted to offer comfort. "Don't worry, Master. She'll be fine. She's incredibly resourceful. She can handle herself." Xiao Qianming rounded on him, his voice tight with frustration. "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one who's." He stopped abruptly, his cheeks flushing crimson. Xiao Zhu's eyes widened in surprise. "Master Yuyo," he didn't dare finish his sentence. Xiao Qianming, realizing his slip-up, quickly backtracked. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just concerned for her safety. As her protector, it's my duty to worry about her well-being." Xiao Zhu, however, was not fooled. He knew that his master's feelings for Luo Qingtong were more profound than mere concern. He just hoped those feelings weren't reciprocated. It would only complicate an already precarious situation. He patted Xiao Qianming's head, his voice soothing. "Don't worry, Master. She'll be back soon." But even as he uttered the words, a knot of unease tightened in his stomach. He prayed he was wrong. Luo Qingtong returned to the academy, her body exhausted, but her mind sharp and alert. She had successfully navigated the emperor's trap and cured his poison. However, she knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The Qianyu royal family wouldn't give up so easily. This was far from over. As she entered her room, she saw Xiao Qianming waiting for her, his small form tense with worry. Luo Qingtong. He rushed towards her, his voice filled with relief. Where have you been? I was so worried. Luo Qingtong's heart softened at the sight of his concern. A genuine, warm smile touched her lips. I'm fine, she reassured him. Just had to take care of a few things. Xiao Qianming's brow furrowed, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. What things? Why didn't you tell me where you were going? I thought something terrible had happened to you. Luo Qingtong sighed, a wave of weariness washing over her. She couldn't reveal the truth, not yet. It's complicated, she said, her voice evasive. I'll explain everything later, I promise. Xiao Qianming pressed her, his voice sharp with anxiety. Complicated? What's so complicated that you can't tell me? Luo Qingtong hesitated, then said, it involves the Qianyu royal family. Xiao Qianming's eyes widened in alarm. The Qianyu royal family. What did they do? Are you all right? Did they hurt you? Luo Qingtong's expression turned grim. They wanted me to become the imperial physician, she explained, her voice flat. To serve them, and only them. Xiao Qianming's jaw dropped. The imperial physician. But why? Luo Qingtong shrugged. They seem to believe him gifted, she replied, a touch of bitterness lacing her tone. They offered me power, wealth, a life of unimaginable luxury, everything I could ever possibly desire. Xiao Qianming stared at her, stunned. And you refused? Luo Qingtong nodded. Of course, I refused. I would never work for them, not even if they offered me the world. They are corrupt and deceitful. I could never trust them. Xiao Qianming's heart swelled with pride. He had known she would never accept. She was too strong, too fiercely independent, to be anyone's pawn. He reached out, taking her hand in his touch gentle and reassuring. I'm so glad you refused. I wouldn't want you to have anything to do with them. Luo Qingtong's heart fluttered at his touch, a warm, comforting sensation spreading through her. She met his gaze, her eyes softening. Thank you, she whispered. Her voice thick with emotion. For caring. Xiao Qianming blushed, his cheeks turning a delicate shade of pink. It's nothing, he mumbled, looking away, his heart pounding against his ribs. It's my duty to protect you. Luo Qingtong smiled, squeezing his hand gently. I know, she replied, her voice warm with affection. And I appreciate it, more than you know. Xiao Qianming's blush deepened. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. He could only stand there, gazing at her. His heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his chest. Luo Qingtong, amused by his flustered state, chuckled softly. Don't worry, she teased, her eyes sparkling. I'm not going anywhere. Xiao Qianming's heart soared at her words. He wanted desperately to believe her, but the nagging premonition of impending doom refused to be silenced. He had a terrible feeling that something was about to happen, something that would irrevocably alter the delicate balance they had found. He was right. The following day, a messenger arrived, bearing an urgent summons from the Qianyu royal family. The emperor had been poisoned, and they required Ziyi Guitong's immediate presence to cure him. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed as she read the message, her intuition screaming that this was a trap. The Qianyu royal family was playing a dangerous game, attempting to force her hand. They were counting on her inability to refuse a plea to save the emperor's life. It was a clever tactic, but she wouldn't fall for it. Not this time. Xiaozu, seeing the dangerous glint in her eyes, swallowed hard, his voice trembling slightly. Master, what are we going to do? This is bad. Really bad. We go to that palace. We're walking into a trap. We might not come back alive. Luo Qingtong's lips curved into a cold, predatory smile. I know it's a trap, Xiaozu. But we're going anyway. Xiaozu stared at her, dumbfounded. Master. Are you insane? Why would we willingly walk into danger? Luo Qingtong's voice was calm and steady, her gaze unwavering. Because I have my own plans, Xiaozu. And this trap of theirs is the perfect opportunity to put those plans into action. Xiaozu, still filled with trepidation, could only nod. He had learned to trust his master's judgment implicitly, even when her methods seemed reckless, borderline insane. Luo Qingtong meticulously prepared for the journey, gathering her most potent medicinal herbs, tools, and rare ingredients. She knew the Emperor's poison would be a formidable challenge. Something designed to test her skills to their very limits. She would need every ounce of her knowledge and experience to succeed. As her carriage approached the imposing gates of the Qianyu Palace, a heavy sense of foreboding settled over her. She knew she was entering the lion's den, a place of unimaginable danger and deceit. But she refused to cower. She would face the Qianyu royal family head-on, and she would not break. She was immediately escorted to the Emperor's chambers, where he lay deathly pale upon his lavish bed, his breathing shallow and ragged, his pulse weak and thready. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, the faces of the assembled courtiers and physicians etched with fear and desperation. Luo Qingtong approached the bedside, her demeanor calm and professional. Her movements were precise and efficient as she examined the emperor, checking his pulse, studying his complexion, and peering into his glazed eyes. The poison, as she suspected, was a complex and potent concoction, one that had baffled the best physicians in the empire. But Luo Qingtong was undeterred. She had encountered far more challenging toxins in her past life. She would find a way. As she worked, she noticed a familiar figure standing near the back of the room. It was Yi Qianming. He stood silently, his gaze fixed on her, his expression unreadable. Luo Qingtong's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly pushed aside her distracting thoughts and forced herself to focus on the task at hand. After what felt like an eternity, she finally identified the intricate components of the poison and began preparing the antidote. It was a risky procedure, fraught with peril. But she had absolute faith in her abilities. A hushed silence descended upon the room as she administered the antidote. Every eye was glued to the emperor, every breath held captive in anticipation. Slowly, a faint flush returned to the emperor's pallid cheeks, his breathing becoming deeper and more regular. His pulse strengthened beneath Luo Qingtong's fingers. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the room, the tension easing ever so slightly. Luo Qingtong, utterly exhausted but profoundly relieved, stepped away from the bedside. She had done it. She had saved the emperor's life. As his strength slowly returned, the emperor looked at Luo Qingtong, his eyes filled with a profound gratitude. "Thank you, Master Ziyi," he said, his voice weak but sincere. "You have saved my life." Luo Qingtong bowed her head respectfully. "It was my duty, Your Majesty." The emperor smiled, a subtle shift in his expression that made Luo Qingtong's blood run cold. Duty? Or perhaps something more? Luo Qingtong's heart plummeted. What did he mean? Lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, the emperor continued. "I've heard rumors, Master Ziyi. Rumors about your connection to Mingzun." Luo Qingtong froze, her blood turning to ice. How did he know? She had been so careful to conceal their relationship. She forced a smile, her voice even and calm. "Your Majesty is mistaken. There's nothing between Mingzun and myself." The emperor chuckled, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Is that so? Perhaps. But I have a feeling you're not being entirely truthful with me, Master Ziyi." Luo Qingtong's mind raced. She had to escape, before he uncovered the truth. "I assure you, Your Majesty, there is absolutely nothing between Mingzun and me," she reiterated, her voice firm. The emperor's smile vanished, his expression hardening. "Very well. But should I discover you're lying, Master Ziyi, you will face the consequences." Luo Qingtong bowed her head. "I understand, Your Majesty." As she left the palace, the weight of the emperor's gaze pressed down on her. She knew she had made a powerful enemy. And this was far from over. Back at the academy, Xiao Qianming was a whirlwind of nervous energy. He paced his room relentlessly, unable to shake the premonition of disaster that clung to him like a shroud. He was deeply worried about Luo Qingtong. Xiaozu, witnessing his master's escalating anxiety, attempted to offer some words of comfort. "Master, please, try not to worry. She'll be fine. She's incredibly resourceful. She's more than capable of handling herself." Xiao Qianming rounded on him, his voice sharp with frustration. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one who's." He stopped mid-sentence, his cheeks burning crimson. Xiaozu's eyes widened in surprise. Master Yu, he trailed off, not daring to voice his suspicions. Xiao Qianming, mortified by his slip-up, quickly covered. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just concerned for her safety. As her designated protector, it's only natural that I'd be worried about her welfare. Xiao Zhu, however, wasn't fooled. He knew his master harbored deeper feelings for Luo Qingtong. He just prayed those feelings weren't reciprocated. It would only create further complications. He patted Xiao Qianming's head reassuringly. There, master. Try not to worry so much. I'm sure she'll be back soon. But even as he uttered the words, a cold knot of foreboding twisted in his gut. He had a very bad feeling about this. Luo Qingtong returned to the academy, exhausted but relieved. She had successfully navigated the Emperor's trap and cured him. But she knew it was only a matter of time before the Qianyu royal family made their next move. This was far from over. Entering her room, she found Xiao Qianming waiting for her, his small form rigid with worry. Luo Qingtong. He rushed towards her, his voice overflowing with relief. Where have you been? I was so worried. Luo Qingtong's heart warmed at his genuine concern. She smiled, a true, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. I'm fine, she reassured him gently. I just had some business to attend to. Xiao Qianming frowned, suspicion clouding his features. What kind of business? Why didn't you tell me where you were going? I thought something terrible might have happened to you. Luo Qingtong sighed wearily. She couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. It's complicated, she said evasively. I'll explain later. I promise. Xiao Qianming pressed her. Complicated? What's so complicated you can't even tell me? Luo Qingtong hesitated, then finally admitted, it involved the Qianyu royal family. Xiao Qianming's eyes widened in alarm. The Qianyu royal family. What did they want? Are you all right? Did they hurt you? Luo Qingtong's expression turned grim. They wanted me to be the imperial physician, she revealed, her voice flat and emotionless. To be at their beck and call. Xiao Qianming's jaw dropped. The imperial physician. But why? Luo Qingtong shrugged. They seemed to believe I'm rather talented. A hint of bitterness colored her tone. They offered me power, wealth, a life of unimaginable luxury, everything I could ever want. Xiao Qianming stared at her, dumbfounded. And you refused? Luo Qingtong nodded. Of course, I refused. I would never work for them. Not even if they offered me the world. They are corrupt and deceitful. I could never bring myself to trust them. Xiao Qianming's chest swelled with pride. Had known she wouldn't accept. She was far too strong, too fiercely independent, to become anyone's pawn. He reached out, taking her hand gently in his. I'm glad you refused, he said, his voice soft and sincere. I wouldn't want you to be associated with them. They are dangerous. Luo Qingtong's heart fluttered at his touch. A wave of warmth spread through her. She met his gaze, her own softening. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For caring. A faint blush dusted Xiao Qianming's cheeks. It's nothing, he mumbled, looking away to hide his burning face. It's my duty to protect you. Luo Qingtong smiled, squeezing his hand gently. I know, she replied, her voice filled with warmth. And I truly appreciate it. Xiao Qianming's blush deepened. He wanted to speak, to tell her how he truly felt, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. He could only stand there, gazing at her. His heart pounding a frantic tattoo against his ribs. Luo Qingtong, noticing his flustered state, chuckled softly. Don't worry, she teased, her eyes twinkling. I'm not going anywhere. Xiao Qianming's heart soared at her words. He desperately wanted to believe her, to cling to that reassurance. But the ominous premonition of impending doom still lingered. Refusing to be silenced. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would shatter the fragile peace they had found. He was right. The following day, a messenger arrived bearing an urgent summons from the Qianyu royal family. The emperor had been poisoned, and they demanded Ziyi Guitong's immediate presence to administer the cure. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed as she read the message, her intuition screaming that this was a trap. The Qianyu royal family was playing a dangerous game, attempting to force her hand. They knew she couldn't refuse a plea to save the Emperor's life. It was a calculated move, a clever tactic, but she wouldn't be so easily manipulated. Not again. Xiaozu, seeing the dangerous glint in her eyes, swallowed hard, his voice trembling. Master, what are we going to do? This is bad. Really bad. If we go to the palace, we're walking into a trap. We might not make it out alive. Luo Qingtong's lips curved into a chilling smile. I know it's a trap, Xiaozu. But we're going anyway. Xiaozu stared at her, dumbfounded. Master. Have you lost your mind? Why would we willingly walk into danger? Luo Qingtong's voice was calm and steady, her gaze unwavering. Because I have my own plans, Xiaozu. And this trap of theirs presents the perfect opportunity to set those plans in motion. Xiaozu, though still apprehensive, could only nod. He had learned to trust his master's judgment, even when her methods seemed reckless and bordering on insane. Luo Qingtong prepared meticulously for the journey, gathering her most potent medicinal herbs, specialized tools, and rarest ingredients. She knew the Emperor's poison would be an intricate and formidable challenge, meticulously crafted to push her skills to their very limit.